Beggars Ride by Nancy Kress, read by Nick Sullivan. Prologue. The prison door swung open, and she stepped through. The air car waited in the parking lot 100 feet away. She had asked her husband this: "Don't come for me. Let me come to you." Will Sandaleros had understood. He waited in the car alone. Jennifer Sharifi stood still, surveying the outside. Grass, trees, flowers, Jean Maud, marylilies, and silver roses, sweet William, and moonweed. It was full summer. The warden beside her said something. She didn't hear him. 27 years. Everything had changed. Nothing had changed. 27 years since she had been tried, convicted, and imprisoned for a crime she most certainly had committed, treason against the United States of America. Except that it had not been a crime. It had been a revolution, a fight for freedom from the sleepers that had tried to plunder and destroy Jennifer's people. The government had used that modern weapon of destruction, ruinous taxes, that eviscerated productive life, and Jennifer in turn had used one even more modern: genetic terrorism. Jennifer Sharifi and her 11 sleepless allies had held 5 American cities hostage to Jean Maud retroviruses until the sleepers let her people go. Only they had not done so. But not because the sleeper government could outwit Sleepless. Jennifer's defeat had come from another quarter, and Jennifer and the others had gone to prison with varying sentences. Jennifer's the longest, 27 years. A second ground car pulled up beside Will's. Reporters? Maybe not in this changed world. An old woman got out of the car, walked in the opposite direction. Jennifer watched dispassionately. The old woman, in her 80s from her face, moved with the smooth, jointed walk and fluid arm swings they all had now, since the change. But the woman was still old, used up, nearly finished. Jennifer Sharifi was 114. She looked 35, and would continue to look 35. But 27 years had been lost, and her world. The warden was still talking. Jennifer ignored him. She concentrated on her rage, massive, molten, welling up like slow, thick lava from the planetary core. Coldly, she walled it off, contained it, directed it. Undirected rage was a danger. Directed rage was an inexhaustible force. It was an engineering problem. Not a muscle of her beautiful face moved. When she was ready, Jennifer walked away from the gabbling warden, away from the Allendale Maximum Security Federal Prison, where she had spent 27 years for treason against a government that by now barely existed. Will didn't kiss or embrace her, but he reached for her hand, and he sat motionless a moment before he started the car. "Hello, Will." "Hello, Jenny." No more was needed. The car rose. Below her, the warden dwindled, and then the prison. Jennifer said to the comlink, "Messages?" "No messages," it answered, which wasn't surprising. The link wasn't shielded. Her messages would be waiting on Will's link, wherever he was living temporarily. There would be a lot of messages, and more in the days to come as Jennifer gathered up once more the strands of her enormous, tangled corporate and financial web. But not in the United States. Never again in the United States. There was one call to make on an unshielded link. "Connect to Sanctuary, public frequency." "Signaling Sanctuary, public frequency," the comlink said. Will glanced at her, returned his gaze to the car. Jennifer's screen flashed the access codes, immediately replaced by her granddaughter's face. So Miranda had been waiting, had known the hour, the minute, of Jennifer's release. Of course. "Hello, grandmother," Miranda Sharifi said from 200,000 miles above Earth. She and the other third-generation Sleepless had been in possession of Sanctuary Orbital for years now. Of Sanctuary, which Jennifer had built to keep the Sleepless safe. Jennifer didn't enjoy irony. Miranda did not say, "Welcome home." Her plain face, with its oversized head and unruly black hair, did not smile. Jennifer looked at her granddaughter, and remembered, and held back the walls around her rage. It was Miranda who had sent Jennifer Sharifi to prison. Jennifer said in her clear, cold voice, "I am resuming possession of Sanctuary. It is legally mine. Your father's authority of guardian-in-law is void by my release. Both of you will vacate the orbital, along with the 26 other super Sleepless and all those who have any formalized business arrangement with you, within 24 hours. If you do not, I will bring against you all the corrupt legal force of government that you brought against me." Miranda said expressionlessly, "We will vacate Sanctuary." The screen blanked. Will took Jennifer's hand. The car approached a Y-Energy security dome in the middle of an Appalachian upland. Old, worn hills, rounded on the top, gentled to leafy dark green, un-Gene mod. Will signaled the shield, and it let the aircar through. He landed on the roof of a stone house, nano-built, on a low hill. They got out. Below Jennifer stretched a meadow of clover and daisies and bees, bounded by a shining stream that broke at the north end into a waterfall. Beyond, mountains rose in blue mists like smoky cathedrals. The sky arched milky white, faint gold at the western edge. Will said softly, "You're home." Jennifer looked at it, all of it, house, meadow, mountains, sky, country. Her face didn't change, except that she closed her eyes, the better to see the meticulously engineered rage. "This home? Never. This is only a battleground." Will nodded slowly and smiled, and they went inside. 1. November 2120 through January 2121. If wishes were horses, then beggars might ride. John Ray, English Proverbs, 1670. 1. There it was, lying on a sidewalk on Madison Avenue in the Manhattan East Enclave. Almost it could have been a fallen twig overlooked by a defective maintenance bot. But it wasn't a preternaturally straight twig or a dropped laser knife or a truncated black line drawn on the nano-coated concrete going nowhere. It was a change syringe. Dr. Jackson Aronow picked it up. Empty. And no way to tell how long ago it had been used. The black alloy didn't rust or dent or decay. Jackson couldn't recall the last time he'd seen one lying around outside. 3 or 4 years, maybe. He twirled it between his fingers like a baton, sighted along it like a telescope, pointed it at the building, and said, "Bang!" "Welcome," the building said back. Jackson's extended arm had brought him within sensor range. He put the syringe in his pocket and stepped into the security portico. Dr. Jackson Aronow to see Ellie Lester. "Half a minute, sir. There you go, all cleared, sir. Happy to be of service, sir." "Thank you," Jackson said, a little stiffly. He disliked affected accents on buildings. The lobby was expensive and grotesque. A floor programmed with a yellow brick road whose bricks shifted every 30 seconds to a different path, all ending up at blank walls. A neon green Venus with a digital clock in her belly, sitting on a beautiful antique Sheraton table beside the elevator. The elevator spoke in a high sing-song voice. "Pleased to be welcome, Sahib. I am being very happy you visit Mem Sahib Lester. Please to look this way. Allow me humble retina scan." "Thank you, Sahib. Wishing you every gracious thing." Jackson didn't think he was going to like Ellie Lester. Outside the apartment door, a hollow of a black man materialized, wearing a faded calico shirt, barefoot. "Sure is glad you here, sir, sure is. Miss Ellie, she waiting on y'all inside, sir." The hollow shuffled, grinned, and put a translucent hand on the opening door. The apartment echoed the lobby, a carefully arranged mix of expensive antiques and ugly, outrageous kitsch. A papier-mâché rat, eating her young atop an exquisite 18th century sideboard. An antique television polished to a high gleam under a diamond filament sculpture covered densely with dust. Faux chairs, all dangerous angles and weird protuberances impossible to sit on. In an age of nanotech, even primitive nanotech, said the latest issue of Design magazine, the material presence of objects becomes vulgar, even irrelevant, and only the wit of their arrangement matters. The two goldfish in the atrium were artfully dead, floating beside a small hollow of a sinking Pequod. Ellie Lester strode out of a side door. She was Jean Maud for size, which gave Jackson her age. Female children engineered to top 6 feet had been briefly fashionable in the late 80s, when material presence hadn't yet been irrelevant. Now that design had decided it was, Ellie compensated for her height with wit. Over her bare breasts, she wore a necklace alternating glowing laser beads with nano-coated animal turds. Her draped skirt was red, white, and blue. Jackson remembered that tonight was election night. "Doctor, where the hell have you been? I called you 10 minutes ago." "It took me 4 minutes to get a GoBot," Jackson said mildly. "And you did tell me that your grandfather was already dead." "Great-grandfather," she said, scowling. "This way." She walked 5 paces ahead, which gave Jackson a good view of her long legs, perfect ass, asymmetrically cut red hair. He thought of pointing the change syringe at her and whispering "bang," but he left the syringe in his pocket. Parody displays weren't actually as witty or intriguing as Design thought. "Coward," jeered the Kazi in his mind. They passed through room after grotesque room. The apartment was even larger than Jackson's on Fifth Avenue. On the walls hung elaborately framed, programmed burlesques. The Mona Lisa, laughing like a hyena. A Sunday afternoon on the Grand Jatte in frantic, dot-dissolving motion. The dead man's bedroom was much different, painted white and undecorated, except for some small pre-digital photographs grouped on one wall. A nursing bot stood silent beside the bed. The old man's lips and cheek muscles had gone slack with death. Not Jean Maud, but he might have been handsome once. His skin was deeply lined, but nonetheless had the healthy look of all those who'd received the change syringe, without spots or lumps or rough patches or anything else caused by either abnormal cells or toxins in the body. Neither existed anymore. Neither did illness. The cell cleaner, half of the change magic, saw to that. Nanomachinery, made of genetically modified self-replicating protein, occupied 1% of everyone's cells. Like white blood cells, the tiny biocomputers had the ability to leave the bloodstream and travel freely through body tissues. Unlike white blood cells, the cell cleaners had the ability to compare indigenous DNA with non-standard variations and destroy not only foreign substances, but aberrant DNA variations. Viruses, toxins, cancers, irregular bone cells. Furthermore, the cell cleaner spared a long list of pre-programmed substances that belonged in the body, such as essential minerals and symbiotic bacteria. Since the change, no doctors carried antibiotics or antivirals. No doctor carefully monitored patients for infectious complications. No doctor needed diagnostic judgment. Jackson, who had graduated from Harvard Medical School the same year that Miranda Sharifi had supplied the world with change syringes, wasn't a specialist. He was a mechanic. Jackson's practice consisted of trauma, change syringe injections of newborns, and death certifications. As a doctor, he was as obsolete as a neon green Venus. a parody display. But not at this moment. Jackson unpacked his equipment from his medical bag and turned on the official medical comlink. Ellie Lester settled herself in the room's only chair. Name of the deceased? Harold Winthrop Wayland. Jackson circled the dead man's skull with the cerebral monitor. No electrical activity, no blood circulation in the brain. Citizen number and birth date? AKM 924681374. August 3rd, 2026. He was 94. She almost spat the age. Jackson placed the dermalizer on Wayland's neck. It immediately uncoiled and spread itself in a dense net of fine synthetic neurons over his face, disappearing under the collar of his silk pajamas and reappearing over his feet. A crawling, probing cocoon. Ellie Lester looked away. The monitor showed no break or other indication of intrusion anywhere on the skin, not even the smallest puncture wound. All feeding tubules were fully functional. When did you discover Mr. Wayland's body? Just before I called you. I went in to check on him. And you found him as he looks now? Yes. I didn't touch him or anything in the room. The dermalizer web retracted. Jackson snaked the lung hose into Wayland's left nostril. As soon as it touched the mucous membrane, the hose took over and disappeared down the bronchial tree into the lungs. Last lung expansion at 6:42 Eastern Standard Time, Jackson said. No evidence of drowning. Sample tissues secured. Now, Ms. Lester, tell me and for the record everything you can remember about the deceased's behavior in the last few days. Nothing unusual, she said flatly. He didn't leave this room much except to be led to the feeding room. You can access the nursing bot's records or take away the whole bot. I tried to check on him every few days. When I came in tonight, he was dead and the bot was on standby. Without having signaled distress signs to the house system? That's not usual. It did signal. You can access all the house records and see for yourself, but I wasn't home, and the connection to the comlink was malfunctioning. It still is. I didn't touch it, so you could see. Jackson said, Then how did you call me? On my mobile link. I also called the repair franchise. You can access... I don't want any of your records, Jackson said. He heard his own contemptuous tone, tried to modify it. The official link was still open. But the police might. I only certify death, Ms. Lester, not investigate it. But does that mean you're going to notify the authorities? I don't understand. My great-grandfather clearly died of old age. He was 94. Many people are 94 now. Jackson looked away from her eyes. Rich, Jean Maud Brown, but flat and shiny as a bird's. Ms. Lester, what did you mean when you said that Mr. Wayland left this room only when the nurse led him to the feeding area? Her shiny eyes widened, and then she shot a look of sly triumph at the comlink. Why, Dr. Aronow, didn't you access your patient's records on the way over here? I told you I'd authorized your access. The GoBot ride was short. I only live 3 blocks away. But you had 4 minutes of idle waiting for a GoBot. From her chair, she gazed at him with brow-raised triumph. He'd bet anything she wasn't Jean Maud for IQ. He said calmly, I did not access Mr. Wayland's medical records. Why did the nurse have to lead him to your feeding room? Because he had Alzheimer's, Dr. Aronow. He'd had it for 15 years, long before the change. Because your much-vaunted cell cleaner can't repair damage to brain cells, can it, Doctor? Only destroy abnormal ones, which left him with fewer every year. Because he couldn't find the feeding room, much less take off his own clothes and feed. Because his mind was gone, and he was a drooling, vacuous, empty shell, whose damaged brain finally just gave up and killed his body, even if it had been senselessly changed. She breathed hard. Jackson knew she was goading him, daring him to say it. You killed him. Then she'd probably sue. He didn't let himself be provoked. After marriage to and divorce from Cassie Sanders, Ellie Lester was a stupid amateur. he said formally, "The cause of death will, of course, have to be made by the medical examiner for the city of New York, after autopsy. This preliminary report is concluded. Comlink off." He put the link in his bag. Ellie Lester stood up. She was an inch taller than Jackson. He guessed the autopsy would show one of the Chinese or South American inhibitors that simply make the brain forget what to do, make it stop sending signals to the heart to beat or the lungs to breathe. Or maybe the autopsy wouldn't show it, if the drug was enough ahead of the detection technology. How had she delivered it? She said, "Perhaps our paths will cross again, Doctor." He knew better than to answer. On his mobile, he made the call to the cops and took a last look at Harold Winthrop Wayland. The wall screen came on. The house system must have been preset. "Final election results. President Stephen Stanley Garrison has been re-elected by a narrow margin. The most startling feature of the results, however, is the number of Americans casting ballots. Of 90 million eligible voters, only 8% voted. This represents a drop of—" Ellie Lester gave a sharp crack of laughter. "Startling. God, he's a disease. Why would anyone bother to vote anymore?" "Maybe as an act of witty parody," Jackson said, and knew that by his saying it, she'd won after all, and it was no comfort that she was too stupid to recognize that. She didn't see him out. Maybe design had decided that manners, too, were irrelevant. But as he left the dead man's bedroom, he looked closely for the first time at the small framed photos on the wall. All but the last were pre-digital copies, faded and uneven in color. Edward Jenner, Ignaz Semmelweis, Jonas Salk, Stephen Clark Andrews, and Miranda Sharifi. "Yes, he was a doctor, too," Ellie Lester said maliciously, "back when you people were really necessary. But those are his heroes, 4 livers and a Sleepless. Wouldn't you know?" She laughed. Jackson let himself out. The hollow of the black man had been replaced by a naked Roman slave, heavily muscled, handsome, but clearly not gene-mod. A liver. The slave knelt as Jackson passed, lowered his eyes, and opened his mouth. Translucent manacles of holographic gold bound him to Ellie Lester's doorknob. "She's the far end of a bell-shaped curve, I know that," Jackson said to his sister Teresa. "So it shouldn't bother me. Actually, it doesn't bother me." "It bothers you," Teresa said in her gentle voice. "And it should." They sat in the atrium of their apartment, having drinks before dinner, which would be old-fashioned mouth food. The atrium wall facing the park was a transparent Y-shield. 4 stories below, Central Park rioted with autumn color under its invisible energy dome. The Manhattan enclaves had recently voted to restore modified seasons, although the vote had been close. Above the shield, the November sky was the color of ashes. Teresa wore a loose flowered dress that fell in graceful folds to her ankles. Jackson had the vague impression that it was out of fashion. Her face, without makeup, was a pale oval under her silvery blonde hair. She was 12 years younger than Jackson's 30. Teresa was fragile. Not in her slender gene-mod body, but in her mind. Jackson's private belief was that something had gone wrong during her embryonic engineering, as something sometimes did. Gene-mod was a complicated process, and once the zygote had become blastomeres, no further permanent engineering was possible. Not, at least, by anyone on Earth. As a child, Teresa had hated to go to school and had clung, weeping in a quiet and hopeless way, to her bewildered mother. She didn't like to play with other children. For days she stayed in her room, drawing or listening to music. Sometimes she said she wanted to wrap herself in the music and melt into it, until there wasn't any more Teresa. Medical tests showed high reactivity in her stress hormone response system, high cortisol levels, enlarged adrenal glands, the heart rate and gut motility and nerve cell death associated with pre-suicidal depression. Her threshold for limbic hypothalamic arousal was very low. She found anything new intensely threatening. In an age of custom-engineered biogenic amines, nobody had to stay fragile. Throughout Teresa's girlhood, she had been on and off neuro farms to rebalance her brain chemistry. The cell cleaner would have made that problematic, since it destroyed everything in the body that it decided didn't belong there, that didn't match either the DNA patterns or approved set of molecules stored in its tiny, unimaginable protein-based computers lodged in and between human cells. But by the time the change brought the cell cleaner, it no longer mattered. At 13, Teresa announced, no, that was too strong a word for Teresa, she never announced, she had said that she was finished with neurofarms for good. By that time, their parents had both died in an aircar crash, and Jackson was his sister's guardian. Jackson had argued, reasoned, begged. It had done no good. Teresa would not be helped. She didn't argue back. Intellectual debate confused her. She simply refused to allow a medical solution to her medical problems. However, at least she didn't, Jackson's secret fear, attempt suicide. She became even more reclusive and more elusive, one of those gentle, pale women from an entirely different century. Teresa embroidered. She studied music. She was writing a life of the martyred sleepless woman Lisha Camden of all irrelevant pursuits, another woman who had been entirely eclipsed by a different generation of far more ruthless females. When the change occurred, Teresa was the only person Jackson knew who refused the syringe. She could not ground feed. She could become infected by viruses and bacteria, and did. She could be poisoned by toxins. She could get cancer. Sometimes, in his darker moods, he thought that his sister's elusive neurological frailties, so divorced from her intelligent sweetness, were the reason he'd become a doctor. Just lately, it had occurred to him that Teresa's frailties were also the reason he'd married someone like Cassie. Watching his sister pour herself another fruit juice, she never drank sunshine, alcohol, or any of the synthetic endorphin drinks like Indoor Kiss, Jackson thought that it was wrong to have his life so shaped by a younger sister who was softly, stubbornly, unnecessarily crazy. That he was weak to have allowed it to happen, and that around Teresa what he felt was strong, probably in comparison, which was itself a weak way to look at it. People like Ellie Lester, Teresa said, they're not whole. What do you mean? He didn't really want to know. It might lead to another of Teresa's tentative, tortuous discussions on spirituality, but the sunshine in his drink was pleasantly affecting him. His bones were starting to relax, his muscles to sway, the trees below to hum in a non-demanding, harmonious background. He didn't want to talk. Certainly not about the data he'd looked up on Ellie Lester when he got home, which included discovering that she would inherit control of her great-grandfather's enormous fortune. Let Tessie babble instead. He would sit in the humming twilight and not listen. But all Teresa said was, I don't know what I mean. I just know they're not whole. All of them. All of us. There's something wrong inside us. I believe that, Jackson. I do. She didn't sound as if she believed it. She sounded unsure as always, with her hesitant soft speech and loose flowered dress. It occurred to Jackson that in an enclave where dinner parties often ended up naked for communal feeding, he hadn't actually seen the shape of his sister's body for years. But then Teresa spoke in a sudden rush. I read something evil today. Actually evil. I sent Thomas into the library DBs for my book, because of something Lisha Camden wrote in 2045. Jackson braced himself. Teresa often sent her personal system, Thomas, trawling through historical databases, and she often misinterpreted what she found there. Or she became indignant over it. Or she cried. Thomas brought me a sentence from a famous doctor who knew Lisha. Hans Dietrich Lauring. He said, there is no such thing as the mind. There is only a collection of electrical and physiological operations we collectively call the brain. He said that. Pity flooded Jackson. She looked so distressed, so ineffectually indignant, at this piece of old and non-startling non-news. But his pity was laced with disquiet. As soon as Teresa had said the word evil, Jackson had a sudden flash of Ellie Lester, taller than he was, teeth bared in a fury that she could not allow into the official medical comlink. She had looked evil, an evil, beautiful giantess. And under the unwrapping of sunshine, Jackson could admit what he had denied before. He had wanted her. Even though she was not really evil, only greedy. Not really beautiful, only obvious. And no more a giant than the sinking miniature hollow of the Pequod beside the dead goldfish in the atrium pool. He shifted uneasily on his chair and took another sip of his drink. "It's evil to deny the mind," Teresa was saying, "let alone the soul." "Tessie." She leaned forward, a pale, insubstantial blur in the gloom, her voice close to tears. "It is evil, Jackson. We aren't just sensors and processors and wiring like bots. We're humans, all of us." "Calm down, honey. It was just a sentence written a long time ago. Musty data in an old file." "Then people don't believe it's true anymore? Doctors don't?" Of course they did. Only Teresa could get this upset over a cliched statement 75 years old, based on other cliches 200 years old. "Tessie, sweetheart." "We have souls, Jackson." Another voice. "Oh, Christ, not another Babylon about souls." She came in smiling, mocking, filling the large room with her larger 5'3", utterly vital presence. Cassie Sanders, his ex-wife, who refused to depart his life, the divorce she'd taken from him just one more thing she casually disregarded now that she had it. On the excuse that she was Teresa's friend, Cassie came and went in the Aronows' apartment as she pleased, took up and discarded the Aronows as she pleased herself always. With her were two men Jackson didn't know. Was one of them her current lover? Both of them? One glance at the older man, and Jackson knew he was on something stronger than sunshine or Endor kiss. Sleek, long, unmuscled, he had the deliberately androgynous body of a vid-star, dressed in a rough brown cotton tunic like a pillowcase already eaten into small holes by the feeding tubules on his skin. The younger man, whose Jean Maud handsomeness uncomfortably reminded Jackson of Ellie Lester's slave hollow, wore an opaque hollow suit that appeared to be made of thousands of angry, crawling bees. His mouth curved in a permanent sneer. Would Cassie actually sleep with either of these diseases? Jackson didn't know. It was difficult to explain why he'd married Cassie, but not very. She was beautiful, with her dark short curls, honey gold skin, and elongated golden eyes flecked with pale green. But all Jean Maud women were beautiful. Certainly Cassie wasn't as lovely or loyal or kind as Teresa, who, next to her ex-sister-in-law, faded, nearly disappeared, flickered weakly like a malfunctioning hollow. Cassie burned with some vital un-Jean Maud force, darkly intelligent, primal, and erotic as driving rain. Whenever she'd touched him, feverishly or languorously or tenderly, with Cassie there was no predicting, Jackson had felt something iron and cold dissolve in his center, something he usually didn't even know he was carrying around. He'd felt connected to nameless, powerful, very old longings. Sometimes during sex with Cassie, her fingernails raking him and his penis moving blind within her like a hot living missile, he would be amazed to hear himself weeping or shouting or chanting, another person entirely, the memory of which embarrassed him afterward. Cassie was never embarrassed, not by anything. After 2 years of marriage, she had divorced Jackson for being too passive. He had been afraid, during the messy weeks of her moving out, that nothing in his life would ever again be as good as those 2 years. And nothing had. Looking at her now, dressed in a short green and gold drape that left one shoulder bare, Jackson felt the familiar tightening in his neck, his chest, his scrotum, a complex of desire and rage and competitiveness and humiliation, that he had somehow not been strong enough to swim in the dark currents of Cassie's inner sea. He put down his drink. He needed his head clear. "How are you feeling, Tess?" Cassie said kindly. She sat down unasked beside Teresa, who both shrank back minutely and put out one hand, as if to warm herself at Cassie's glow. Their friendship was inexplicable to Jackson. They were so different. But once someone had come into Teresa's life, she clung to that person forever. And Teresa brought out the protective, tender side of Cassie, as if Tess were a helpless kitten. Jackson looked away from his ex-wife, and then refused to allow himself that weakness, and looked back. "I'm fine," Teresa whispered. She glanced at the door. Strangers increased her agitation. "Tess, these are my friends, Landau Carson and Irv Kanzler, Jackson and Teresa Aronow. We're on our way to an exorcism." "To a what?" Jackson said. Immediately he wished he hadn't. Irv drew an inhaler from a pocket of his consumable tunic and sniffed more of whatever was rearranging his neurochemistry. That was the problem with the more toxic recreational drugs. The cell cleaner busily removed them almost as soon as they entered the body, so users had to keep renewing every few minutes. "An exorcism," Landau drawled in a phony accent. He was the one wearing bees. "Haven't you heard of them? You must have heard of them." "Jackson never hears of anything," Cassie said. "He doesn't leave the enclave and go down and dirty among livers." "I leave the enclave sometimes," Jackson said evenly. "I'm delighted to hear it," Cassie said, helping herself to a glass of sunshine. The fingernail on her left ring finger was sheathed in a hollow of a tiny chained butterfly frantically beating its wings. "An exorcism," Landau said with exaggerated patience, "is simply nova, a genuine brain trot. You'd die laughing." "I doubt it," Jackson said, and vowed that was the last thing he'd say to this toxin. He folded his arms across his chest, realized that probably made him look as stuffy as Cassie had implied, and unfolded them. Landau said, "Surely you've heard of the Mother Miranda cults? They're sort of a liver religion, so typical. Miranda as the Virgin Mary interceding with the divine, and for what? Not salvation or grace or world peace or any of those dreary eternal verities. No, Mother Miranda's followers are praying for immortality, another change. If the super Sleepless could deliver the first syringes, goes this risible theology, then they can just as well go deliver another miracle that makes all the grubby little livers go on forever." Irv laughed, a sudden bark like ice cracking, and sniffed again from his inhaler. Direct pleasure center excitation, Jackson guessed, with hallucinogenic additives and a selective depressant to lower inhibition. Cassie said, "God, Landau, you're such an unoriginal snob. It's not only livers involved in the Mother Miranda cult. There are donkeys in it, too." Teresa shifted on her chair, a small, agitated gesture that was the kinesthetic equivalent of a whimper. Jackson took her hand. Landau said, "But it's mostly livers, our newly self-sufficient, self-disenfranchised 80%, and livers are the only ones who do exorcisms." Teresa said, so low that at first Jackson thought nobody else heard her, "Exorcising what? Demons?" "No, of course not," Landau said. His bees buzzed fractionally louder. "Impure thoughts." Cassie laughed. "Not exactly. More like ideologically incorrect thoughts. It's really a political check to make sure all the good little Mother Mirandites are convinced of her semi-divinity. They just call it an exorcism because they drive out wrong ideas. Then they all create yet another broadcast to beam up at sanctuary." "Real brain trot entertainment," Landau said. Jackson couldn't help himself. "And this ritual is open to the public?" Of course not, Landau said. We're crashers, humble novices in search of some faith in our pointless and overprivileged lives. Teresa's quiet agitation increased. Cassie said, "What is it, Tess?" Teresa burst out, "You shouldn't!" Immediately, she shrank back into her chair, then stumbled to her feet. Jackson, still holding her hand, felt her fingers tremble. "Good night," she whispered, and pulled free. Cassie said, "Wait, Tessie, don't go." But Teresa fled toward her own room. "Nice going," Jackson said. "I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't think she'd react like that. It's not real religion." "She's religious? My condolences," Landau said. "And in the immediate family, too." "Shut up," Cassie said. "God, you bore me sometimes, Landau. Don't you ever get tired of supercilious posturing?" "Never. What else is there, really? And may I remind you, Cassandra dear, that you too are on your way to this exorcism, "No," Cassie snapped, "I'm not. Get out." A sudden mood shift into anger. How exciting. Jackson stood. Landau touched a point on his chest. His bees buzzed louder. For the first time, Jackson wondered if they were all hollows, or if some of the bees were weapons. Certainly, Landau would wear a personal Y-shield. "Out!" Cassie screamed. "You heard me, you infection! Out!" Her dark eyes blazed. She looked as much a caricature as Landau. Was she posturing as well, amusing herself with the drama? Jackson realized he could no longer tell. Landau stretched lazily, yawned ostentatiously, and rose to his feet. He drifted toward the door. Irv followed, sniffing his inhaler. He hadn't said a single word. When Cassie returned from slamming the apartment door, Jackson said quietly, "Nice friends you have." "They are not my friends." She was breathing hard. "You introduced them as friends." "Yeah, well, you know how it is. I'm sorry about Tessie, Jack. I really didn't know Landau was so stupid." If this humility was a posture, it was a new one. Jackson didn't trust it, didn't trust her. He didn't answer. Cassie said, "Should I go after Tess?" "No. Give her some time." But from behind him came Teresa's soft voice. She must have heard the door slam and crept out. "Did they leave?" "Yes, pet," Cassie said. "I'm sorry I brought them here. I didn't think. They're real asses. No, not even that, just assholes, fragments, partial people." Teresa said eagerly, "But that's just what I was saying earlier to Jackson. There's something not whole about people now. Why, this afternoon Jackson saw—" "I can't discuss a confidential medical case," Jackson said harshly, although of course he already had. Teresa bit her lip. Cassie smiled, humility already replaced by mockery. "A murder, Jack? I can't think what else they'd need you for that you can't discuss. A little off your usual practice of the once-monthly accident and the twice-monthly newborn change." He said evenly, "Don't needle me, Cassie." "Ah, Jackson, darling, why couldn't you be so assertive when we were married? Although I really do think we're better off as friends. But Tess, honey," she turned back to his sister, suddenly kind again, while Jackson was left wanting to hit her, or convince her, or rape her, "you have a point. We donkeys are just coming apart since the change. Joining liver cults, or doing brain-deadening neurofarms, or marrying a computer program. Did you hear about that? For dependability. Your AI will never leave you." She laughed, throwing back her head. The dark curls danced, and her elongated eyes narrowed to slits. Teresa said, "Yes, but we don't have to be that way." "Sure we do," Cassie said. "We're bred to be forthrightly self-serving, even the best of us. Jackson, did you vote today?" He hadn't. He tried to look condescending. "Did you, Tess?" "Never mind, I know you didn't. The whole political system is dead because everyone knows it isn't where power is anymore. The change took care of that. The livers don't need us. They're managing quite well in their own lawless little ground-feeding pseudo-enclaves. Or they think they are, which is, incidentally, why I'm here. We have a crisis. Cassie's dark eyes sparkled. She loved crises. Teresa looked frightened. Jackson said, "Teresa, did you show Cassie your new bird?" "I'll get him," Teresa said, and escaped. Jackson said, "Who has a crisis?" "Us. 10 Tech. We have a factory break-in." "That's impossible," Jackson said. And then, because Cassie usually had her facts straight, "Which factory?" "The Willoughby, Pennsylvania plant." "Well, it's not exactly a break-in yet, but somebody was just outside the Y-shield this afternoon with bioelectric and crystal equipment. The sensors picked them up. If you'd check your business net, Jack, you'd know that." "But oh, I forgot. You were out investigating murders." Jackson kept his temper. Cassie had received a third of 10 Tech in the divorce settlement, since her money had kept the company afloat during the disastrous year when a nano-dissembler plague had attacked the ubiquitous alloy Duragem, and businesses had died like livers. He said evenly, "Nobody got inside, did they?" "Nobody can breach security on a Y-energy shield. At least not—" "Not livers, you mean? And who else would be out in the wilds of central Pennsylvania? I think you're probably right. But that's why we should go have a look. If it's not livers, who is it? Kids from Carnegie Mellon sharpening their data-dipping skills? Industrial espionage by Canco? Super Sleepless like, gasp, Miranda Sharifi, obscurely interested in our little family-owned firm? What do you think, Jack? Who's messing with our factory?" "Maybe the biosensors are malfunctioning. Another failure like Duragem." "Maybe," Cassie said, "but I checked around. Nobody else is having sensor failure, just us. So I think we better go have a look. Okay, Jackson, tomorrow morning?" "I'm busy." "Doing what?" "You're not busy. That's the trouble. None of us are busy enough. Here's something to do. Something that impacts our finances. Something with actual substance. Come with me." She smiled at him full voltage, her long golden eyes full of the sly pleading missing from her brash words. Jackson knew that later, when he lay in bed going over and over this conversation, he wouldn't be able to recreate the compelling quality of her eyes, her body language, her tone. He would remember only the words themselves, without grace or subtlety, and so would curse himself for saying yes. Cassie laughed. 9 o'clock, then. I'll drive. Meanwhile, I'm starving. Oh, Tessie, here you are. What a pretty little Jean Maud bird. Can you talk, cage bird? Can you say social dissolution?" Teresa held up the Y-energy cage and said, "He only sings." "Like most of us," Cassie said. "Desperate, discordant tunes. Jackson, I am hungry, and not for mouth food either tonight. I think we should keep Tessie company while she eats, and then you should invite me to dinner in your so tasteful feeding ground." "I'm going out," Jackson said quickly. Teresa looked at him in quick surprise, as quickly veiled. He never knew how much she knew or guessed about his feelings for Cassie. Teresa was so sensitive to distress, she must intuit that it would be impossible for Jackson to go calmly with Cassie to the dining room, take off most of his clothes, and lie on the nutrient-enriched soil while his changed body absorbed everything it needed, in perfect proportions, through his feeding tubules. Jackson couldn't do it. Although the lure was powerful, to lie there under the warm lights, their changing wavelengths carefully selected for a relaxing effect on the mind, to breathe the perfumed air, to turn on one elbow to talk casually to Cassie, to watch Cassie feed, lying on her stomach, her small firm breasts bared to the earth. Impossible. He waited until his erection had subsided before he stood and stretched with elaborate nonchalance. "Well, people are waiting on me. Good night, Cassie. Teresa, I won't be late." "Be careful, Jackson," Teresa said, as she always did. As if there could be any danger inside the Manhattan East Enclave protected by a Y-shield from even unwanted weather. Teresa had not left the apartment in over a year. "Yes, be careful, Jack," Cassie mocked tenderly, and his heart caught when it seemed he heard regret mixed with the tenderness. But when he turned back, she was fussing again over Teresa's bird and didn't even look at him. There was tomorrow. Damn tomorrow. It was a business trip to find out what was going wrong at the Willoughby plant. He owned the damn company, or at least a third of it. He should check the factory's printouts more, give orders to the AI running it, link with the 10 Tech chief engineer, check up on problems. He should be more responsible about this and Teresa's money. He should do a lot of things. He walked out into the cold November night, which, under the dome, felt like a warm September night, and tried to think up some place he might actually want to go to dinner besides home. 2. Lizzie Francie halted on the rough grass of the dark Pennsylvania field and put a warning hand on Vicky Turner's arm. A cold wind blew. 100 feet ahead, the 10 Tech Y Energy cone factory loomed in the moonlight, a windowless foam-cast rectangle, blank and featureless as a prison. "No farther," Lizzie said. "The security shield starts 4 feet ahead. See the change in the grass?" "Of course not. I can't see anything," Vicky said. "How can you?" "I was here in daytime," Lizzie said. "We have to move a little left. I left a marker." "You're shivering, Vicky. You cold?" "I'm freezing. We're all freezing. That's the point of this whole illegal nocturnal burglary, isn't it? God, I must be crazy to do this. How far left?" "Right here. Don't go any closer. The infrared detectors will pick us up." "Not me. I'm too cold. I'd register as rock." "No, I don't want your cape. You need it." "I'm not cold," Lizzie said. She opened a gunny sack and started pulling out equipment. "That's your hormones surging. Pregnancy's little Y energy cones." "All right, I'll take the cape." "How come your skin doesn't eat clothes as fast as mine? Or does it just seem that way?" "Lizzie, baby, don't get too excited. This isn't going to work. Nobody, no matter how good a data dipper, can break into a Y energy factory." "I can," Lizzie said. She grinned at Vicky. Vicky didn't know. Vicky was smart, was educated, was a donkey, those people who used to run the world. Vicky had given Lizzie her first terminal and taught her to use it. Lizzie owed Vicky everything, but Vicky didn't know. Vicky was old, maybe even 40, and she'd grown up before the change when everything was different. Lizzie had spent the last 5 years on data nets, and she knew how good she was. There wasn't anything she couldn't dip, except, of course, Sanctuary, which didn't count. It was Lizzie's world now, and she could do anything. She was 17. The two women unwrapped Lizzie's equipment from some rough woven sacking. Crystal library, system terminal, laser transmitter, full-body hollow suits. Some of the equipment was jerry-fitted, some was stolen, all was old. Lizzie, her enormous belly pushing out the woven tunic already eaten into holes, worked at fitting the equipment together and aiming it at the building. Vicky, wrapped in Lizzie's cape, suddenly chuckled. "I met Jackson Aronow once." "Who's Jackson Aronow?" "The owner of this factory we're about to rob, or at least his family is. Know your unwitting and unwilling patrons, I say. The Aronows are old-line conservative, stuffy, boring, and rich as Sanctuary." Lizzie looked up from the decryptions on her screen. "Really?" "No, of course not really. God, don't be so literal. Nobody's as rich as Sanctuary." "Okay, we're ready," Lizzie said. She grinned, a flash of white teeth in the gloom. "You got your sack? Now remember, the shield will only be down for 10 seconds before the system resets. You armed?" "If you call this armed," Vicky said, hefting the metal pipe she carried in her right hand. "Did you have to make it so heavy? If I'm going to die, I want to die light." "You're not going to die, and you're all but naked. Isn't that light enough?" Lizzie laughed, a low, reckless giggle, and her fingers flew over her equipment. Okay, now. A laser beam pierced the darkness, straight and hard-looking as a diamond filament rod. It shot through the invisible energy shield to an exact, virtually indistinguishable site high on the building. A second beam followed. Multiple data addresses, their bioelectric molecules excited by the first laser array, absorbed additional energy from the second in a different region of the spectrum. The absorbed energy initiated a branching reaction, a sequential one-photon architecture, a set of wavelength keys fitted across the darkness into a self-repairing chromophore lock originally built of bacterial protein. The night filled with invisible information, some of it sent to other reception sites, farther relays, terminals in other states. There was nothing Lizzie could do about that. Security systems by their nature alerted other systems, but the air shimmered briefly, and the Y-energy security shield dissolved. In 10 seconds, it had reset itself into other codes, other patterns. Lizzie and Vicky, carrying their sacks, had already run across the rough grass and through the information failure. It was all done in silence. No floodlights came on, no alarms sounded. Factories were fully automated, managed by systems based in distant enclaves, which the owners could consult and direct. Or not. The first security bot skimmed toward the two women almost immediately, terrifyingly fast, a soundless metal shape speeding over the grass. Vicky pointed her EMF disruptor at it, and it stopped, sank to the grass, and fell over. Vicky laughed, a little too wildly. Die, impudent upstart! Come on, Lizzie urged. She scrambled a second security bot and raced for the factory doors. They had locked, of course, when the Y-shield went down. Lizzie punched in the manual overrides and held her breath. It had taken months to dip the 10 tech security data, and even though she could do anything, somehow she had never quite found the resets for the manual overrides if the security breach had automatically reset them. She hoped that meant there weren't any resets, that the designers were so arrogant or so cheap they'd gone with faith that the complex Y system was enough, that no one could breach it, except, of course, Sanctuary, who had no reason to try. Sanctuary and Lizzie Francie. The doors opened, and Lizzie took a precious moment to squeeze her eyes shut in a brief prayer of thanksgiving to a God she didn't believe in. Billy's God, her mother's God. Lizzie didn't need him. She'd done it. Actually done it. Broken into a donkey factory where energy cones were manufactured to steal enough of them to take her tribe through the winter. They had everything else they needed since the change. A plastic polymer tarp for the feeding grounds, water that no longer had to be clean, an abandoned soy processing factory from before the change with more than enough space to house their tribe, a weaving bot that could easily turn out enough clothes and blankets for everyone, even young people whose bodies ate clothes fast. But they had no Y-cones, and winter in the Pennsylvania hills was cold. Now that donkeys no longer shipped things like cones and blankets in exchange for votes, tribes just had to take care of themselves. Nobody else would. Lizzie opened her eyes. Another security bot darted from an alcove, and she zapped it with the disruptor. Hidden monitors were, of course, recording the break-in, but both she and Vicky were enveloped in head-to-foot holosuits. To the monitors, Lizzie appeared to be a 12-year-old blonde girl, 8 months pregnant. Vicky was a red-headed male donkey dressed in a business suit, and all the infrared detectors would get were 2 heat patterns of human shape, female gender, a certain size and mass and metabolism, but not a certain identity. It was so easy. Dart in, stuff 7 or 8 cones from the end of the line into their sacks, run back outside to wait for their equipment to fire a second laser array, and bring down the shield for another 10 seconds, dart back out. Pretty good for a liver brat. She ran down the short corridor to the factory floor, her belly swaying from side to side like a bonga rhythm, and stopped dead in front of a place gone mad. 2 forklifts rolled across the floor, One lifted, stacked, sorted, and removed nothing at all, batches of empty air. The other carried a single packing case to the end of the robotic line, placed it there, received empty energy cones, carried the same case to the center of the factory, and dumped the cones out. Then the forklift rolled through them, sending them clattering over the floor, while it carried the empty case back to the end of the line. The case was dented in 100 places, folded in at one corner, missing both ceiling flaps. It looked as if it had been through a war. On the line itself, robotic arms lifted the delicate cone innards fed to them from the sealed cold fusion unit, and missed stuffing the power packs into the cones by 6 inches. The packs, crushed, dropped to the side of the line. The empty cones sailed on to the waiting demented forklift at the end, which packed, transported, and spilled them before going back for more. Vicky said, "What?" "The ranging algorithms are messed up," Lizzie said with great disgust. "God, the waste! Your owner friends must only check the output figures, not the quality control or even the—" "Vicky, it's not funny." "Of course it is," Vicky said. She doubled over with laughter, barely able to get the words out. "It's hysterical. The high-tech donkey world. It looks like a bot holy war on Endor Kiss. And that stuffed shirt Jackson Aeronow. We only have a few more minutes, and we need cones. Help me find the cones packed before this all went diseased. It can't have been going on that long." "No? Look at the dust on everything." And she was off again, holding her belly, laughing like some crazy in a bedlam hollow. Sometimes it seemed to Lizzie that she was the adult, and Vicky, with her weird donkey humor, was the child. Then other times, Vicky became the woman Lizzie remembered from her childhood. Scary, knowing, poised, a being from that other world that ran the world. Why couldn't people be as easy to dip as systems? Lizzie jabbed Vicky in the shoulder. "Come on, help me look." Vicky did. The two women raced to the packing crates stacked by one of the forklifts when they went crazy. Fortunately, the sealer bot must have malfunctioned as well. None of the crate flaps were fastened, which made it easier to yank them open. The first crate on the top tier was empty. So was the second. The third was stuffed with crushed energy packs, smeared against and around cone casings like smashed yolk on unsmashable eggshells. Lizzie marveled. What could have messed up the programming this bad? "Vicky, time is running out. The laser array only fires once more. Resets are paired, but the next pair is random generated. I couldn't program for it." "Here," Vicky said, no longer laughing. "This crate is good. Grab 3 or 4 cones. Go! Go!" They stuffed cones into their sacks, then ran for the corridor, dodging rolling empty cones from the forklift. At the corridor's end, the factory doors were closed. "What? Lizzie, they locked automatically." Lizzie clawed at the manual override, punching in various standard open doors codes. Nothing happened. The security system had reset the door closings, but not the openings. It made sense. If the shield was breached, let whoever had breached it go in, but not out. Vicky said, "Can you get in and get the code?" "Not before the shield collapses. That happens right now." Lizzie slumped against the door. Slowly her body sank to the floor like a rag doll, the sack of precious Y-cones clutched in her arms. She hadn't done it after all. She had failed. She, Lizzie Francie. And now Vicky and she were trapped inside the cone factory, an impenetrable foam-cast building. And even if they could get out of the building, they were stuck inside a 10-foot dirt moat around that building by a Y-energy shield that no molecule larger than air could get through. Trapped. "Vicky," she whispered. And she wasn't the girl genius data dipper. She was a scared 17-year-old girl clutching at an adult. "Vicky, what are we going to do, us?" "We're going to wait," Vicky said matter-of-factly. She settled down beside Lizzie, her back also to the door, "until somebody shows up." Lizzie reached out one hand to a patch of floor just beyond the door. She scraped her finger across the foam cast. It came up dusty. "And how long you think it's been, you, since anyone was here, them?" She heard her speech sound liver again, the way it did when she was upset. She hated that. Vicky said, "Someone will come to check on the security breach. Some tech supervisor dispatched by 10 Tech. The dust isn't significant. It doesn't mean no one ever comes. The whole air filter system could have blown at the same time as the rest of the bots and spewed all its accumulated dust back in again." Lizzie frowned. Arguing made her feel less hopeless. "But the bot's been malfunctioning them for a long while. Look at all them ruined cones." "Not that long. We found the whole cones in the top tier of crates, remember?" "And how do we know us that these cones even work?" Lizzie demanded. She sat up straighter, hauled one out of her sack, and turned it on. Immediately it radiated heat. She switched it to light, then both at once. "It works." "Well, good. Maybe whoever comes will let us keep these few cones." Vicky just looked at her. The hopeless feeling washed back over Lizzie again. No, of course they wouldn't let her keep the cones. They were donkeys. They would arrest her and Vicky for breaking in and stealing, and whatever else they decided to, and Lizzie and Vicky would go to jail. Her baby would be born in jail, and the tribe wouldn't have heat after all for the winter, and so would have to migrate south like most other tribes had already done. Well, that wouldn't be so bad. The weather was warm in the south, and there weren't so many people left after the awful change wars that there wasn't room. But Lizzie's mother and Billy wouldn't go. Not if Lizzie were in jail here in the north. Would it be up here? Sometimes they sent people to distant prisons. The donkey cops could send her anywhere. She said miserably, "They still control us, them, don't they? Despite the change, and the cell cleaner, and everything." Vicky didn't answer. She just sat there, a renegade donkey herself, living with livers, watching the insane forklift lift and transport and stack empty air while damaged cones rolled past and clattered into corners. They waited all night, sleeping a few hours on the factory floor. Toward morning, a cone rolled into Lizzie and nudged her from fragmented dreams into fragmented wakefulness. She shoved the cone away and considered disabling the forklift. But why bother? She curled up tighter around the still unfamiliar mass of her swollen belly. The factory floor was cold. Beside her, Vicky snored gently, but Lizzie couldn't make sleep return. She sat up. During the night, more of her tunic had disappeared. The belt she wore tied under it, now riding high over her belly, was made of non-organic synthetic from before the change. From it hung a pouch of the same material, holding her tools. If only she had a tunable laser saw. A laser saw would have cut them out of here in no time. But only donkeys had laser saws. That had been true even during the change wars, when there had been warehouse looting and fighting, and what Vicky called the monumental civil upheaval of a dying order. Donkeys stayed in their impenetrable enclaves, and their laser saws stayed right in there with them. Besides, a laser saw wouldn't get them through the outer security shield. Nothing but a nuclear weapon shattered that kind of Y-shield. The factory lights had stayed on all night. Probably they were programmed to do that whenever the building detected human presence. In the soft glow, the bots performed busily, doing everything wrong. Stupid machines. But no stupider than Lizzie had been, her. As long as she could remember, Lizzie had felt to herself like two people. One of them had always been asking questions, pestering her mother and Billy and later Vicky, tearing through the pathetic educational software at school, taking bots apart whenever she could, listening, listening, listening. There was so much she wanted to know, and until Vicky and the change, no way to find it out. So when Vicky Turner had left the enclaves and come to live with Livers and given Lizzie a good terminal and crystal library, there was everything to learn. Lizzie One of the two Lizzies grew almost frantic, working the terminal every waking minute, trying to make up for lost time. And when she'd first learned how to use the net, and then how to master it, and finally how to dip it for any information she wanted anywhere, when she'd learned all that, it was like she was drunk. Drunk with power. Drunk with doing. She'd designed the weaving bot for the tribe, and dipped unshielded warehouses until she found all the necessary parts to build it, and located the abandoned factory for their winter home, and gotten pregnant by a boy she'd never see again and didn't need to. Lizzie Francie had decided she wanted a baby, just like she'd decided she wanted a weaving bot, so she got it. She could do that. She could do anything, and nobody better tell her otherwise them. But every minute underneath, there was this whole other Lizzie that nobody saw, who was scared all the time, who knew she was going to mess up eventually. It was only a matter of time, and then everybody would know that she was really a fake, and couldn't do anything right, and didn't belong. This second Lizzie was frightened to data dip important corporations like Tech, and afraid that once her baby was born, she wouldn't be able to take good enough care of it, and terrified that Vicky and Billy and her mother would somehow go away and leave her all alone, alone with a baby, which two other girls her age in the tribe, Tasha and Sharon, managed just fine, but which Lizzie Francie couldn't, because Lizzie, this other Lizzie, only wanted to curl up in a ball and stop being the person a whole tribe looked to for answers stolen from a net she didn't really own after all. Donkeys owned it, just like they always had. Sitting with her back against the cold foam-cast wall, watching bots destroy Y-cones, she suddenly couldn't take the two Lizzies inside, both making her throat tight and her head hurt. I can do anything. I can't do anything right. Both pressing on her chest. She had to get up, get away from them both. She left Vicky sleeping. Vicky looked beautiful sleeping. She always looked beautiful. Jean Maud. Lizzie would never look like that. She was too short, and her chin looked funny, and her wiry black hair stuck out in all directions because she pulled at it while she was dipping. But Vicky was asleep, and Lizzie wasn't, so it was up to her to do something about their situation. Something, anything. Restlessly, she prowled the perimeter of the huge room where fewer cones rolled underfoot. Past the main doors, that she had spent a futile hour last night trying to dip, past the panel over the narrow air filter ducts, which Vicky had pried open. The air filter system had indeed blown with the rest of the programming. Lizzie's bare feet smeared dirty tracks on the floor. But then, on the far wall, she noticed something that, in her exhaustion and discouragement, she'd missed last night. 8 feet up from the floor, a metal panel about a yard square, the exact color of the gray foam-cast wall. Not storage, not way up there. Not the sealed Y-energy housing. That was clearly marked, and anyway, impenetrable. This panel didn't look impenetrable, at least not from down here. Small bolts secured each corner. Lizzie stalked the second forklift, busily lifting and sorting and packing empty air. When it rolled to a stop at the end of the assembly line for another non-existent load, she climbed aboard its flat, squat motor housing. It took her 3 minutes to reprogram the machine to carry her to the wall, lift her up 7 feet, and stand motionless while she unbolted the nearly invisible panel, putting the bolts in her pouch. The panel, made of some light alloy, she set carefully behind her on her metal pedestal. Behind the panel lay a foam-cast indentation shaped like a squared funnel. About 4 feet deep, it narrowed at the far end to a square only 8 or 10 inches. The indentation hadn't been on the building plans Lizzie had dipped while planning this raid. At the end of the funnel was another bolted panel. She leaned into the indentation, but she couldn't quite reach the small panel, especially over the awkward bulge of her belly. She heaved herself into the opening and crawled forward. These bolts wouldn't unscrew. If only she had a laser saw. Doggedly, she worked the bolts, but they wouldn't loosen. Yet they weren't nano-fitted. The building was 16 years old, too old for most nanotech. Finally, in frustration, Lizzie whacked the panel with the butt of her screwdriver. "Damn it all to stinking hell!" Billy's favorite oath. "Awaiting instruction," the panel said. She stared. She'd never even considered that the thing might be a screen or voice-activated. Stupid, stupid. What if she'd damaged it by her pounding? "Awaiting instruction," the panel repeated. "Run test sequence." Find out what she was dealing with. "Running test sequence." The lights in the factory turned off. 5 seconds, 10, then back on. Next, the noise of the robotic line ceased. A silence shocking as an explosion. Before the din started again, she heard Vicky yell, "Hey! Lizzie?" Lizzie, intently studying the small screen, didn't answer. Elation ballooned in her. It was running the entire sequence, including the outer security shield. She knew what it was now. Part of the backup system, minimally accessible from the outside of the building for safety control, but physically unreachable by any of the line bots, which, as Lizzie had just demonstrated, were all too easy to reprogram. Some of the old-style factory systems had experimented with all sorts of weird redundancies to take physical control back from mischievous disablers. If she could dip this auxiliary system, she could control the Y-shield from here. And she would be able to dip the system. She was the unbeatable Lizzie Francie. "Repeat test sequence," she said, intending to call out to Vicky at the next silence. But right after the lights check, the little wall panel blanked. Then it flashed without vocals, "Test sequence aborted, 65B." 65B, a standard industrial code for a microwaved master signal from a supervising, physically present source outside all systems. It was a common failsafe for any process involving radiation. The entire operation could be halted by the right signal from a handheld remote at close range. Donkeys had arrived at the factory. Lizzie backed out of her cramped hole 8 feet above the floor. Her feet felt for the metal platform of the forklift. It wasn't there. Frantically, she twisted her pregnant body until she faced outward. The forklift had rolled 3 feet away from the wall, probably as part of the machinery test sequence. Balancing precariously, Lizzie stretched out both arms full length. She could just grasp the edge of the alloy panel resting on the forklift's raised platform, but the panel wasn't fastened to the forklift itself, and she couldn't use it to pull the machine forward. And then suddenly the forklift came to life again and started to roll toward the line, returning to its normal work, and Lizzie was left with the alloy panel dangling from her fingers 8 feet above the floor. Below, the demented non-work continued. Bots assembled Y-energy works and then smashed them against misaligned cones. Cone shells rolled across the floor, forklifts stacked air. From behind a pile of packing crates, Vicky raced into view, yelling something over the din, probably Lizzie's name. And then the main doors on the adjacent factory walls sprang open, and 2 donkeys walked in, a man and a woman, with drawn guns. Immediately, not even thinking about it, Lizzie pulled the alloy panel back into place, holding it from the inside with her fingernails. Heart hammering, she cowered high inside the foam-cast wall. Interlude. Transmission date, November 4th, 2120. 2. Selene Base, Moon. Via Toledo Enclave Ground Station, GEO Satellite C-1494, U.S. Satellite E-398, France. Message type, unencrypted. Message class, Class D, Public Service Access, in accordance with Congressional Bill 4892-18, May 2118. Originating group, Roy L. Spath's Tribe, Ohio. Message. Mother Miranda, blessed are the poor in spirit, them, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We are the poor, us, and we beg you for mercy. You gave us God's gift, you, with them change syringes, and we honor you. Blessed are thou amongst women. You gave us freedom from the horsemen of famine and pestilence, and so now we ask you, us, for freedom from death. Give us this day our immortal life, and send syringes that can change us to live like you do, forever and ever, world without end. Amen. Pray for us, that we have no hour of death. Thank you. Acknowledgement, none received. 3. 50 miles from Willoughby, Cassie said, "The factory security shield's down." Jackson glanced at his ex-wife, her face intent on the screen of her handheld mobile. The air car flew on automatic, and he had been half asleep, secretly pleased with his ability to doze in her presence. That meant her effect on him was lessening, didn't it? Or maybe it just meant he wasn't used to being awake and in the air at 6:29 in the morning. In the east, the sky was lightening, and in the pearly light, Cassie's profile looked pure and luminous. Teresa would say Cassie looked like a saint. At this thought, Jackson snorted. She said, "You don't believe me? Look for yourself." She thrust the mobile at him. He thrust it back. "I believe you. The program must be malfunctioning. Nobody can break into a Y-shielded factory." God, Jackson, your faith in technology is touching, especially for a scientist. The program is not malfunctioning. The shield went down for a 30-second manually controlled test sequence. Not only that, it went down last night as well. That time triggered by an outside system with a proprietary air car signal. I wonder why they collapsed the shield entirely instead of just opening a car passage. Nobody has the proprietary signal but you and me and the chief tech, who, you told me, is in the Mexico complex this week. He is. Somebody must have dipped the data banks. God, that dipper must be good. Maybe we can hire him. He's in there now. In there now? 2 human bodies recorded on infrared, Cassie said. She was smiling, presumably at the drama. In the face of her enjoyment, Jackson felt ashamed to say he wasn't keen on confronting 2 possibly armed intruders, who were probably crazy. What could anybody want inside a cone factory? Cones were cheap. Ten-Tech shipped all over the Northeast, or so Cassie had told him. No donkey would break in just for the hell of it. Except kids, of course. It must be hot-shot kids, counting data-dipping coup. He said, "What are they doing in there?" Jackson, infrared scans aren't detailed enough to show what people are doing. I thought doctors were supposed to be good at machines. I'm good at the machines I need to be good at. They don't happen to include factory robotics. Well, said Cassie sweetly, maybe you should broaden your horizons. Jackson folded his arms and resolved to say no more. Cassie could always make him feel like a fool. Well, this was her party. Let her run it. She opened a passage through the shield for their air car. His laser signal lit up the bioelectronic receiver high on the factory facade. The car landed on the ground in front of the main doors. Locked, Cassie said with relish. There's an offline security redundancy. Evidently our young dippers aren't that good. Jackson said noncommittally. She reached inside her shirt, a non-consumable synthetic, and drew out 2 pistols. Grinning, she handed one to Jackson, who took it with what he hoped was lofty indifference. He didn't like guns. Did Cassie remember that? Of course she did. Her IQ was gene mod. She seldom forgot anything. Okay, she said, let's reclaim the Alamo. You shoot anybody and I'll bring charges against you myself. I swear it, Cassie. Good old Jackson, champion of the underdog, even when the underdog is overprivileged kids guilty of criminal trespass. Come on, let's go. She unlocked the doors, and strode down the corridor. Jackson hurried to catch up with her, so it wouldn't look as if he was cowering behind. At the factory floor, he stopped. The whole place had gone crazy. Robots malfunctioning, debris all over the floor. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't the chief tech picked it up? Cassie laughed. Jesus Christ, look at it! Just look at it! It's not funny? Of course it is. Wait, look over there. A man raced toward them. Jackson's grip tightened on his gun until he saw the man wasn't armed. Then he saw it wasn't even a man, but a woman or boy dressed in a head-to-toe holosuit of a man dressed in a brown business suit. The figure spotted them and stopped running. Cassie raised her gun. Come here, slowly and with your hands high in the air. Now. The figure put his hands over his head and walked slowly forward. Now turn off the holosuit, Cassie said. One hand only, moving slowly. The button was at his waist. The holosuit vanished, and Jackson saw not the college kid he'd expected, but a woman in her 30s, Jean Mod, dressed in a skimpy homespun eaten into fresh-looking holes. Tall, violet eyes, small nose. Jackson was good with faces. I know you. We met years ago someplace, at some party. Diana something. Not anymore, the woman said sourly. Look, Jackson, this is all lovely and social, but if you'll excuse me, I've got a crisis on my hands just now. Cassie laughed. Her dark eyes shone with malicious pleasure. You certainly do. Criminal trespass. How do you pull it off? You don't look like a dipper. I'm not, but my friend is, and she's lost someplace in here. She's just a kid. Ah, a kid after all, Cassie said. Well, let's find her. She did something with her mobile, and all activity in the factory ceased. Robots froze in mid-motion. The noise cut off. In the silence, Cassie yelled, Yoo-hoo! Diana's young friend! Come out wherever you are! Ollie, ollie, oxen free! Diana smiled. Jackson had the impression it was in spite of herself. No one answered. Cassie said casually, Is your friend armed? Only with hubris, Diana said, and for half a minute Jackson wasn't sure which of them had spoken. It was something Cassie might have said. Then Diana called, Lizzie, where are you? It's all right, Lizzie, come on out. We're not going to gain anything by postponing the inevitable. Lizzie? No answer. Lizzie, Diana called again, and this time Jackson heard the note of fear. This is Vicky. Come on out, honey. Behind them, something clattered to the floor. Jackson turned. 8 feet up the wall, a hole had appeared, framing a scared brown face and crouching body. The girl had wiry black hair sticking out in all directions. She looked about 15. And she wasn't the donkey college dipper he'd expected. She was a liver. Good God, Cassie muttered. Diana, Vicky, what the hell was her name, called, Lizzie, how did you get up there? Programmed the forklift, the girl said. Her voice was less scared than her face. Bravado? She glared at the 3 below her. Send it back over. Nobody moved. Jackson saw that none of them knew how to do that. Even Cassie could only manipulate the commands she knew, not reprogram on the spot. How come this girl could? A liver? Cassie put her mobile and gun in her pocket, walked over to the closest motionless forklift, and pushed it. Her face turned red. The machinery barely budged. Diana, Vicky, and Jackson joined her. Together, they hauled the cumbersome thing to under the hole in the wall. Nobody spoke. Through his annoyance, Jackson suddenly felt weird. The 3 donkeys performing manual labor in the silent factory to rescue a criminal liver. The whole situation was surreal. He suddenly thought of something Teresa had once said to him. I never feel any place is really normal. Okay, Diana Vicky said when the forklift was against the wall. Come on down, Lizzie. And for God's sake, be careful. The girl was facing outward. Carefully, she turned herself in the narrow cubbyhole. As her bottom came into view, Jackson saw that she was mostly naked. Of course, livers didn't seem to care that their bodies consumed their clothes, at least not the livers who'd grown up since the change. When they didn't wear pre-change synthetic jacks, they went half naked in their wandering tribes. Sometimes it seemed to Jackson that Miranda Sharifi had reversed evolution, turning a stationary industrial population back into hunter-gatherer nomads, who neither hunted nor gathered, at least not food. The girl in the wall stretched out her legs, feeling with her feet for the forklift behind her. She extended her body full length, unrolling from the cubbyhole like a printout, and Jackson saw that she was heavily pregnant. Careful, Diana Vicky repeated. As the girl's toes touched the forklift, it began to roll away from the wall. No other machinery in the factory resumed operations. Cassie grabbed for the forklift and tried to shove it back against the wall. After a moment of shock, the other two sprang forward to help. It was too late. The forklift rolled back to its pointless duties as if the humans weren't there. The girl screamed and tumbled 8 feet to the foam-cast floor. She landed on her right arm. Jackson dropped beside her and restrained her from moving. His voice was level and calm. Cassie, get my bag from the car. Now. She went immediately. Jackson said, Don't move, I'm a doctor. My arm, the girl said, and started to cry. Jackson checked her pupil reaction. Both pupils round, the same size, equally reactive to light. He didn't think she'd hit her head. The arm was a compound radial fracture, the bone sticking whitely through the skin. It hurts me. Just lie still. You'll be fine, Jackson said, more confidently than he felt. He put a hand on her abdomen. The fetus kicked back, and he breathed out in relief. Cassie returned with his bag. Jackson slapped a pain patch on the girl's neck, and almost instantly her face relaxed. The patch was a potent mixture of pain nerve blockers, endorphins, and the highest legally allowable dose of pleasure center stimulators. Lizzie began to grin idiotically. He palpated her arm and asked her to shift her shoulders through a range of motion. She could. Her other limbs were undamaged. He bioscanned her neck, spine, and internal organs. No damage. The portable trauma unit imaged the fracture, guided the two pieces into alignment, and sprayed Instacast from elbow to wrist and between 2 fingers for anchor. Jackson rocked back on his heels. That was it. The cast, cell cleaner, and the girl's own body would do the rest. Lizzie, Diana Vicky said, reminding Jackson that she was there. Her voice broke. Jackson looked at her. He had no idea what the relationship between them was, but on the older woman's face was naked fear and love. It gave him a little shock. Could the girl be her daughter? An un-gene mod liver from before the change? It didn't seem likely. Lizzie, are you all right? Of course she's not all right. Her arm's broken, Cassie said tartly, at the same moment that Jackson said with professional soothing, Everything's under control. Diana Vicky swept them both a look of scorn. Lizzie, honey? Cassie said sarcastically, Diana, honey, you have some explaining to do here, both of you. Public records show you changed your name to Victoria Turner. It doesn't say what you're doing trespassing in my factory. Vicky, who'd been kneeling beside the dreamy girl, stood up and faced Cassie. Vicky was taller, older, wilder looking in her eaten liver tunic and cropped, sleep-matted hair. Her jaw hardened, and Jackson had the sudden impression that she had faced challenges that he couldn't imagine. There was a nasty lift to her eyes as she squared off with Cassie. To Jackson, it looked like an even match. What I'm doing trespassing in your factory, Vicky said distinctly, is seeing that an entire tribe doesn't freeze this winter. Not that I would expect that to concern you. You have no idea what does or does not concern me, Cassie said coolly. What should concern you is felony charges. Breaking and entering, criminal trespass. Oh, I'm terrified. Look, Cassie Sanders, how long is your kind going to... My kind? Unlike you, I suppose. Going to go on blind to what's happening all around you. The easy answers are over. No more trade goods, colored beads, and energy cones in return for the votes that keep your kind in power. Oh, my God, recycled Marxism, Cassie said scornfully. Seize the means of production, right? And you two are the advance army? I don't think. That's obvious. Who are you, anyway? Some renegade donkey gone native among the livers to feed her own ego? A white goddess among the savages, Pathetic. Vicky looked at Cassie a long time. Her face changed. Then she said quietly, Who am I? I'm the person who led the Genetic Standards Enforcement Agency to arrest Miranda Sharifi, and then led the citizen legal fight to free her. It was the first time Jackson had ever seen Cassie at a disadvantage. Her small, vivid face registered shock, disbelief, reluctant acceptance. Something about Vicky Turner compelled belief, the way she stood with her feet braced wearily apart, as if she'd been resisting strong winds a long time. Or the way she stood guard over Lizzie, lying on the floor in a glowing stupor from Jackson's painkillers. Or maybe just Vicky's face, full of a complex regret. Not the expression Jackson would have expected. Vicky said quietly, We still need Y energy. It's the only thing we do need from you. And we'll try to take it and you'll try to stop us, and a lot more lives will be lost in the process. Just as in the Change Wars. Lives that might have gone on with the cell cleaner for 100 years. You have the weapons, the enclaves, the sophisticated electronic security systems you've never let livers learn. But they are learning, Cassie Sanders. I didn't data dip your system. Lizzie did. There are a lot of young Lizzies out there learning more every day. And we have the numbers on our side. There are 10 of us for every one of you. She had said it. Every donkey's nightmare. The fear that rested under the frantic parties and disdainful fashions and stupid time-wasting social competition. Don't look behind you. They may be gaining on us. There are a lot more of them than us. And do you know the worst part? Vicky said, still in that quiet, deadly voice. You can't even see it. Not from stupidity, God knows. From willful blindness, for which you are going to deserve exactly the price you end up paying. Oh, God! Spare me the melodramatic rhetoric, Cassie said. She had recovered from the unexpectedness of Vicky's attack. The law is perfectly clear, and you're in violation of it. To Jackson's surprise, Vicky smiled. Law only works if the majority agree to let it. Don't you know that? No, of course you don't. You're a simple binary code. On for your own interest, off for everybody else. You could be dipped by a child, and you were. Cassie said angrily, Ad hominem sophistry isn't argument. You're not a homonym. You're not even a synonym. You're redundant code in the human information, and you're already obsolete. The woman was playing. Standing there, laughing at his ex-wife, this ragged renegade was playing with Cassie, with the situation. How much self-assurance did it take to play like that? Or was it not self-assurance, but self-righteousness? Suddenly, Jackson wasn't sure he could recognize the difference. Cassie said, Defiant words, not power. She keyed her mobile, and a security bot came to life. It lifted itself off the littered factory floor and sped toward them. A faint shimmer marked the edges of the energy bubble it threw over Vicky. You are intruding on 10 Tech private property, the bot droned. "You are being held immobile until further instruction." Vicky went on smiling. Jackson saw Cassie's face darken. "You are intruding on Ten-Tech private property. You are being held—" "Shut it off," Jackson said, before he knew he was going to. Both women looked at him. It was clear that, absorbed in their battle, they'd forgotten he was there. Cassie smiled and keyed her mobile. The bot stopped reciting. "No," Jackson said. "I meant turn it off completely. We're not arresting her." "Oh, yes, we are," Cassie said. Reaction welled up in Jackson, a gush of pure hormones he couldn't label, or didn't want to. It poured out in a single sentence, which even as he said it he knew didn't mean what the words said. "You don't run Ten-Tech." She said, "That's exactly what I do." "Who else? You? You never even look at the financial dailies, let alone the operational data. Leave this to me, Jack. Stick to your medical knowledge." His obsolete medical knowledge, she meant. Baiting him again, but this time not affectionately, which meant she felt cornered. Cassie cornered. Suddenly, he loved the idea. "I'm not leaving this to you, Cassie. I'm overruling you. Turn off the security bubble." She keyed her mobile. The bot started to move toward the entrance. Vicky, encased in the shimmering hollow energy field as if in a translucent box, was carried along toward the factory doors. "Cassie, turn the bot off." "Bring that stuffed and trussed child, Jack. We're leaving." "Turn it off. I own Ten-Tech, not you." "We each own a third of Ten-Tech," she said evenly. The bot continued to move toward the door, encapsulating Vicky. Jackson said, "I'm voting Teresa's third." And just like that, just that easily, he reached out and took the mobile from Cassie's hand before she knew he would. Or could. "Give me that back." "No," he said, and gazed at her steadily, and saw the storm coming. Despite himself, his own blood surged. God, she was beautiful, the most desirable woman he'd ever seen. She grabbed for the mobile in his right hand. He gripped her upper arm with his left hand and held her off easily. Why hadn't he ever thought about how much stronger he was than Cassie? He should have gotten physically assertive with her years ago. His penis stiffened. "I said, give me that now." "No," Jackson said, smiling. Damn, he didn't know the codes, or he would turn it off himself. Well, he could figure it out. Or, strange thought, ask Lizzie. Cassie stood still, not struggling in his grip, her golden skin flushed with anger, the green-flecked eyes burning. He had never felt such power over her. Cassie bent her head toward his left hand, which was still clenched on her upper arm. Pain tore through him, surprising him into opening his fingers. Blood poured over them. She had bitten him. Below him, the girl on the floor said something. "That's your trouble, Jackson," Cassie said. "You're never prepared for the counterattack." Two long slashes slanted across the back of his hand. Clean slashes, not tooth-jagged, and deep. Cassie had retractable blades implanted between her teeth. Venous blood pooled dark red on the floor beside Lizzie, who again said something. Jackson couldn't take it in. Was he going into shock? No lightheadedness or nausea, and the wound wasn't serious. Cassie must be able to control the retraction of her blades. His shock was all emotional. No one was behaving consistently, including the girl on the floor. She looked up at him, dopey-eyed in a smiling haze of neuropharms, from a sudden pool of water between her legs, and chuckled, "The baby's coming." "Oh, Christ," Cassie said. "All right, you fly the girl back to her tribe, and I'll stay here with Ms. Champion of the Downtrodden until the cops arrive. There must be somebody in the liver camp who can do whatever it is they do for childbirth." "That someone is me," Vicky said, kneeling beside Lizzie, holding both her hands. Something in her tone moved Jackson. Or maybe he was moved by nothing more than his need to oppose Cassie on medical grounds, his only sure landscape. Ms. Turner's right, Cassie. She needs to stay with the girl. Charming maternal solicitude, Cassie said. So what do you want me to do, Jackson? Arrest them both? Neither. Not until this is over. And you're just going to deliver a baby here on the factory floor? Of course not. She's not going to deliver for hours yet. Jackson's hands probed gently and found that the baby was a breech. The change, he reflected grimly, had not reversed certain key aspects of human evolution. The birth canal was still considerably narrower than an infant head, and the cervix still not designed for anything but head-first delivery. And Lizzie, prima gravida, was only 8 months along. Still, it could have been worse. Jackson's fetal dermalizer showed a frank breech presentation. Buttocks first, hips flexed, knees extended, feet up near the shoulders, rather than the more dangerous footling or complete breech. The head was flexed forward, ballotable in the fundal region. The fetus, a boy, weighed a viable 2,800 grams. Heart rate, a steady 160. Growth, normal. The cord wasn't prolapsed, and the placenta wasn't previa. It would decently follow the birth, which, Jackson estimated, was still a few hours off, although she was already 5 centimeters dilated, halfway. It could have been much worse. Lizzie, Jackson said, I'm going to lift you. We're going to take you somewhere more comfortable. Which is where, Cassie said. You're not taking her, them, to the enclave. Lizzie said without urgency, I want to go home. She didn't look like a mother-to-be. She looked like a smiling, slumberous child. Jackson sighed. All right, we'll take you home. But Lizzie, listen to me. I'm going to stay there with you. The baby is upside down. Do you understand? I'm going to stay with you so I can rotate him at the proper times. The girl looked up at him. In her drugged black eyes, Jackson was startled to see a flash of coherent relief. He had expected her to protest, however languorously, against having a donkey doctor attend her. Hadn't she grown up with medical med units, when politicians still supplied those? But maybe Lizzie was different from most livers because of this Vicky Turner. Or maybe Jackson didn't know as much about livers as he thought. Cassie said, You're just going to walk into a liver camp with nothing but a pistol? Accompanying a criminal that I'm damn well going to have arrested? Jackson stood, lifting Lizzie in his arms. She could walk, but pulling her upright would hasten delivery. He didn't want to deliver a breech, even a frank breech, in an air car. He faced Cassie. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And you can come with me or not, just as you choose. Cassie hesitated. In that moment of her hesitation, Jackson felt a surge of hope. Was that actually respect in her eyes? For him? Whatever it was, it vanished. It's a 2-person car, Jack. He'd forgotten that. All right. I'll take them both to their camp. 3 can squeeze into my car. You stay here and call for another car. I'll call for the cops is what I'll do. Fine, call for the cops. They can come to the camp too. We'll have a party. He carried Lizzie across the factory, now frozen except for the forklift Lizzie had reprogrammed, which went on lifting nothing. Had it resumed work because Lizzie had made an error? Maybe she wasn't as good a dipper as Vicky claimed. Or maybe Cassie's signal from the air car had set up some kind of interference or override. Jackson didn't know enough about industrial systems to guess. Behind him, he heard Cassie on her comlink. Police emergency, code 655. Damn it, Robert, answer me. Vicky sat on the passenger seat, cradling Lizzie on her lap. 2 half-naked women in tattered clothes, wet from Lizzie's burst water, hair matted, smelling of blood and sweat and dirt and amniotic fluid. It was close in the car. Vicky had a mocking tendency to catch his thoughts. As the air car lifted, she said, And when was the last time you played doctor to livers, Doctor? He didn't answer. The car flew through the passage he opened in the security shield. Lizzie said dreamily, "Another one's coming. It's so weird. I feel it, but I don't." Jackson looked at the aircar console. The interval between contractions had shortened. 10 minutes. That fast. He speeded up. "Fly west," Vicky said. "Follow that river." The camp turned out to be an abandoned soy processing factory. Only livers had ever eaten soy. Now no one did, and all the soy franchises had gone bankrupt. The building was windowed gray foam cast, decayed and badly patched. All around stretched fields, returning to weeds, bushes, saplings of maple and sycamore. Their scrawny branches were bare. Jackson had forgotten how ugly ungene-mod nature was in November, especially in these high hills or low mountains or whatever they were. He set the air car down in front of the building's main door, which had fallen or been torn off its hinges and then clumsily wired back on. Inside, Jackson knew, the machinery would have long since been removed for retooling, or looted during the change wars, or vandalized. Nothing was less necessary now than large-scale agriculture. The moment the air car landed, they were surrounded. The horde, it seemed like a horde, even though Jackson counted only 11 people, shoved their faces against the windows, grimacing. Dressed in warmer clothes than Vicky and Lizzie, they nonetheless looked primitive. Old synthetic jacks in garish colors over or under woven tunics. Ungene-mod faces with a weak chin or low beetling brow or too broad forehead or small squinty eyes. An older man was actually missing a front tooth. And this was post-change. What had these people looked like before the cell cleaner? "Lizzie!" "It's Lizzie and Vicky." "They're back, them!" "Lizzie and Vicky!" Vicky said, "Release the door, Jackson." How had she come to be the one in charge? The horde threatened to spill into the car itself. Vicky handed Lizzie out. The girl grinned dopily as her all-but-naked belly tightened in another contraction. Jackson made himself climb out the other door. A young man, large, heavy, strong, glared at him. A teenage boy scowled and clenched his fists. Vicky said, "He's a doctor. Leave him alone, Scott. Shockey, you take Lizzie. Carry her carefully. She's in labor." The boy said, "I don't care me if he's a doctor. What did you bring one of them here for, Vicky? And where's the cones, them?" "Because Lizzie needs him. We didn't get any cones." The crowd made a subverbal noise Jackson couldn't interpret. The inside of the building was dark. Jackson realized that the lights no longer worked, and the only illumination came from the plastic windows. It took his eyes a minute to adjust to the gloom. The room was large, although not as large as the Willoughby factory. 3 sides of the perimeter had been divided into curtained cubicles made of shelving, of old furniture, of broken sections of foam cast, of dead and gutted machinery, even of roughly cut logs. Inside each cubicle were makeshift pallets and personal possessions. Through the south window, Jackson saw a tent of clear, flexible plastic, probably stolen, stretched 4 feet above the churned-up earth. A natural light feeding ground. In the open middle of the floor sprawled dilapidated sofas, chairs, tables, all surrounding a small portable Y-energy cone of the sort used on camping trips. This communal room was warmer than the outside, but nowhere near what Jackson thought of as room temperature. Vicky said, "That's the only cone still working in the camp, and it's not designed for a space this big. Fires are problematic because it's so hard to ventilate properly through foam cast. Although we have a design for a Franklin stove, which is our auxiliary plan to 10 tech cones. Meanwhile, we share the one cone we have. You, of course, would simply have had it seized by the richest family among you." "You could have migrated south," Jackson retorted. "Safer here." Everybody else is migrating south for the winter. We are not heavily armed." "Oh," Lizzie said, in hazy appreciation. "Oh, I feel another one coming." A handsome, middle-aged black woman came running across the floor. "Lizzie! Lizzie!" "It's all right, Annie," Vicky said. "Doctor, this is Lizzie's mother." Lizzie's mother didn't even glance at him. She grabbed whatever portion of Lizzie still carried in the enormous young man's arms she could reach and held on tight. "You bring her in here, Shocky. Careful, you. She ain't no gunny sack, her." Jackson saw Vicky smile, an unamused, turned-down smile. Some history between the two women. 3 women. Shocky concentrated on maneuvering his swollen, limp, smiling burden into one of the sleeping cubicles. Annie blocked the narrow passage with her ample body. "Thank you, Doctor, but you can leave now, you. We don't need no help, us, with our own. Bye." "Yes, you do, Ms. You do. It's going to be a breech birth. I have to rotate the fetus at the proper times to—" "Ain't no fetus, it's a baby." Vicky said, "For God's sake, Annie, get out of the way. He's a doctor." "He's a donkey, him." "If you don't move, I'll move you myself." Despite himself, the scowling boy had moved closer. Jackson felt a surge of impatience. Were livers always threatening physical violence? It was tiresome. He said firmly, "Madam, I will move you if you don't let me at my patient." "Why, Jackson," Vicky said, "I didn't know you had it in you." Her tone, so much like Cassie's, infuriated him. He pushed Lizzie's mother aside and knelt beside Lizzie, who lay smiling on her bed. A thin mattress of non-consumable plastic, blankets of recycled plastic jacks. The only other furniture was a battered chest and a molded plastic chair that looked like it had once been used for target practice. The walls were hung with the kind of gaudy colored metal-on-fake wood art that livers liked, depicting a scooter race on fluffy yarn clouds. On the bureau lay a Janssen Segura terminal and crystal library, of the kind used by the most well-funded scientists. Jackson blinked at it. Lizzie's dark eyes were merry with cheating pain. "It don't hurt at all, me. When Sharon had her baby, she hollered her." "No meds for Sharon," Vicky said. "No profit in it for donkeys." Jackson said, "You people shouldn't have destroyed the warehouses." "Why not? You people had stopped shipping to them." He hadn't come here to argue politics with a renegade donkey. Jackson reached inside his bag. "What's that, it?" Annie said. She loomed over the bed like an avenging angel. A strong female odor came from her, musky and strangely erotic. Jackson thought about what it would have been like trying to maintain asepsis in these conditions. Before the cell cleaner. "It's a local muscle relaxant patch, to expand the vaginal opening as much as possible and prevent tearing before I do the episiotomy." "No knife," Annie said. "Lizzie'll be just fine, her. You get out." Jackson ignored her. A hand gripped his shoulder and jerked him backward just as he applied the patch to Lizzie. Then Vicky grabbed Annie, and the 2 women tussled until behind him, Jackson heard a voice say, "Annie, you stop that, love." Lizzie still smiled at Jackson in drugged serenity, while her enormous belly stretched and contracted, shuddering with fleshy quakes. She held his hand. Jackson turned to see a stately black man, at least 80 years old, in the strong and healthy mode 80 had become, leading Annie firmly from the cubicle. Behind the retreating Annie stood a whole crowd of livers, silent and hostile. He turned back to Lizzie. "What can I do?" Vicky said briskly. "Nothing. Stay out of the way." "Lizzie, turn on your left side." "Good." It was another hour before he had to do the episiotomy. Through his quick, large cut, there would be no infant head out first to widen the passage, Lizzie smiled and hummed. The old man, Billy, had miraculously kept Annie quiet. There, but quiet. "Okay, Lizzie. Push." This was the drawback of the neuro farms swarming through her system. They were selected to not cross the placental barrier, but they vastly reduced Lizzie's need or desire to do anything as focused as pushing. Come on, push. Pretend you're shitting a pumpkin. Lizzie giggled. The baby's little ass presented itself through his mother's blood. Jackson waited until the infant's umbilicus had passed the perineum, then grasped the baby's hips and applied downward traction until the scapulae appeared. Carefully, he rotated the baby so its shoulders were anterior-posterior. When the shoulders were delivered, he rotated the squirming small body back for a face-down delivery, the least likely to cause head trauma. Push again, Lizzie. Harder. Harder. She did. The baby's head finally squeezed out. No visible head trauma, good muscle tone, minimal ecchymosis and edema. Cradling the baby's soft, wet buttocks in his hand, Jackson felt his throat suddenly tighten. He checked the child with his monitor and then laid him, slimed with blood and vernix, on his mother's chest. The cubicle was again full of people. Privacy was evidently not a liver value. He delivered the placenta, cut the cord, and drew a change syringe from his bag. The entire crowd drew a collective breath. Ah! Jackson looked up in surprise. Vicky said, in a voice completely different from any he'd heard from her, "You have one." A change syringe? Of course. Then it hit him. You don't, outside the enclaves. Our birth rate is higher than yours, she said wryly, and our supply less. When the syringes just stopped appearing a few years ago, you donkeys scavenged and stockpiled them all. So your children get sick. Some, anyway. Could die. Don't you know armed battles are being fought over the remaining syringes? He did, of course, but watching it on the news grids was different from seeing this crowd eye the syringe hungrily, from feeling their tension, smelling their desperate avidity. He said quickly, "How many unchanged children are in your tribe?" None yet. But we only had one syringe left, for Lizzie. Next pregnancy... How many syringes have you got, Jackson? 3 more. He almost added, with me, saw his mistake in time. You can have them. He injected the baby, who predictably started yelling. Somewhere outside the cubicle, a man's voice said harshly, "Donkey cops, hear them!" Vicky smiled at him. The smile surprised him. Frank, weary, and yet somehow comradely, as if his delivering Lizzie's baby and handing over the other syringes had changed things between Jackson and the liver tribe. It took him a minute to realize the smile was a put-on, but she said softly, "You going to let that bitch arrest your patient, Jackson?" Lizzie lay laughing maniacally over her baby. Either the Neurofarm Company had put too much pleasure stimulant in the patch, or Lizzie was especially maternal. The baby wailed loudly. People called and argued in the tiny space, some congratulating Lizzie, some threatening the cops. Absurd, they'd be armed and shielded like fortresses. Some demanding to know why there weren't new Y-cones. The smell of packed-in humanity was overwhelming. Jackson looked at Vicky's smile. He thought of Cassie's anger, her mockery of him. Vicky said, under cover of the din, "You told Cassie that you vote 2/3 of Ten-Tech stock, yours and your sister's. You could drop the charges." Why would I want to do that? She merely waved her hand to indicate all of it, the baby, the cold room, the ragged livers, the arguing. The cops he knew must be standing beyond the wall of people who were biologically impervious to disease and hunger, but not to cold or violence or other people's greed. Suddenly he thought of Ellie Lester, who thought that natives, second-class subjects, slaves, livers, were ever so witty, who thought that powerlessness was funny, unlike Cassie, who merely thought it was boring. Yes, he said. I'll drop the charges. Yes, Vicky echoed, and stopped smiling, her eyes narrowing as she regarded him closely, as if wondering what use it might be possible to make of him next. 4. Today, Teresa thought. Today's the day. Lying in bed in the early morning, she felt the familiar dark cloud descend over her mind. Heavy, queasy, hopeless. The black dog that doesn't let go, somebody from old times had called it. The dark woods than which death is scarcely more bitter. That was Dante. She remembered that name. The gnawing beast in the brain. She didn't remember that one. Thomas, her personal system, had found the quotes for her in some DB, and now Teresa couldn't forget them. Dogs, beasts, woods, clouds. She had lived with the darkness for so long she no longer needed names for it, yet she had them, like the fear itself. But today the queasy fear wouldn't stop her. She wouldn't let it stop her. Today was the day. Take a neuropharm, Jackson always urged her. I can prescribe. Tessie, it's an imbalance in brain chemistry. No different from diabetes or anemia. You write the chemistry. You fix it. And Teresa could never find the words to make him understand. Because words weren't important. Action was. She had come to see that only recently. When she had realized it, a deep shame had swept over her. How could she have been so self-indulgent, so pampering of her own weak soul? It had been over a year since she'd even left the apartment, and she'd never left Manhattan East Enclave. Never. Her whole life. No wonder she was what Jackson called clinically depressed. Today. Jackson had gone with Cassie very early to check on a factory someplace. Teresa had heard him leave. She was uneasy whenever he left the apartment, but she tried very hard not to let him see that. It wouldn't be fair. Jackson already stayed home too much for her sake. Hovered over her, worried about her. I can prescribe. He worried about her, but he didn't understand. He didn't see what he called a brain chemistry imbalance really was. Only Teresa knew what it really was. It was a gift. Her soul's way of telling her that she had better change her ways and pay attention to what really mattered. Teresa swung her feet over the side of the bed and waited for the daily anxiety to subside. If she let herself, she could stay in bed all day. It was so safe there. Instead, she walked into the sonar shower, took a 30-second wash, and walked out again. In the bedroom, she caught sight of herself naked in the long mirror on the west wall, and stopped. She didn't even look like everybody else. Her body was beautiful, she supposed. Everybody was beautiful. But she somehow looked not there. Pale hair and eyes, pale small face, pale skin. What had her parents been thinking of? A fairy, a ghost, an insubstantial hollow, fuzzy at the edges. No wonder she didn't belong anywhere. Didn't know even a single person who could understand her struggle for what it really was. Not even Jackson, loving brother though he was. Even Jackson thought that Teresa had been born wrong, that she'd been damaged somehow during her in vitro gene mod. Even Jackson couldn't see the nature of the gift that Teresa had been handed, because it was a gift, no matter what anyone said. Pain always was. Pain meant that you had to change something, had to learn to think differently about the world. Seeds, Teresa imagined, felt tremendous pain when they burst their husks in the cold, dark earth and began to push blindly toward a light they had never seen. Pain was what made you grow. No one seemed to understand that. Everyone she knew, as soon as they were in pain, did everything they could to make it go away. Medicine, recreational drugs, sex, frantic parties, which were all, when you got right down to it, the same thing. Distractions from pain. How come nobody else in this century thought like that? Only her. Each environment, Jackson had said once in the slow, careful way he always talked to her, rewards different personality profiles. Ours rewards vivaciousness, aggressiveness, coupled with the appearance of not caring, a certain careless cruelty. You're not like that, Tess. You're a different kind of person. Not a worse kind, just different. It's all right to be different. Yes, it was. But only because she'd come to believe that her differentness had a point. The black cloud in her brain, the fear of everything new, the attacks of anxiety so strong that she sometimes couldn't breathe, their point was to make Teresa break her lazy husk and push blindly toward the light. She believed that. Even though she'd never seen it and didn't know quite what she was pushing toward. Even though sometimes she despaired that the light was even there. But that was part of the gift, too. It made her question everything that happened around her, in case she missed a vital clue to what she was supposed to do next. She hadn't told Jackson that part. He already worried too much about her, and he wouldn't understand anyway. That was actually funny. Jackson was the smart one. Teresa, the one whose IQ modification hadn't quite worked. Certainly she'd never been very good at school software. But Jackson wouldn't understand that although he had been right about different personalities being rewarded in different cultures, he hadn't taken the idea far enough. Teresa had. She'd spent thousands of hours at her terminal, slowly and laboriously sending Thomas to search through the history DBs. And she'd found the place that would have rewarded who she was. The age of faith. She should have been born Catholic. In the late Middle Ages, when men and women had been honored for devoting their lives to the uses of pain in the service of spiritual growth. She would have belonged. To enter an abbey, to have a reason for a cloistered life, joined with others in constant prayer. But she had been born into an age when no one she knew even believed in God, including her. Tears filled Teresa's eyes. She dashed them away impatiently and moved away from the sight of her naked body in the mirror. It was stupid to cry. She had been born now, not then, and that must be part of the gift, too. She was meant to find another way, a different push toward the light she so often despaired of finding. And after months, years of meditation and false starts, she had come to see what that way was. She must go out. Out of the apartment, out of the enclave. Jackson usually urged her not to watch the news grids because they made her feel so much worse, and until a few months ago, Teresa had been glad to do what Jackson wanted. But lately she had watched holovid whenever Jackson wasn't home. And although most of the news had, of course, been about donkeys, there had been glimpses of livers, too. Between the stock market reports and enclave politics, and even an occasional national report from Washington, which nobody seemed to think anymore was anywhere near as important as internal enclave affairs, just glimpses of livers. And those livers were suffering. Not from hunger, not that ever again, but from lack of things like energy cones and decent clothing and replacement parts for terminals. While people like Teresa and Jackson and Cassie and those loathsome friends Cassie had brought by last night had more things than they knew what to do with. That's when shame had burned her. And then Teresa had seen something on the holovid that made her know she was meant to go outside. There were livers actually trying to organize into spiritual groups. And the news channel had shown where one of those groups was wintering. The holovid had been sneering, of course, but it had given district coordinates. She dressed in one of her long, loose, flowered dresses. Teresa designed them herself, sending sketches and her measurements to a tailoring franchise that would still work in cotton. She found a warm coat, they didn't have weather voting outside, and an old pair of boots. But then she hesitated. What should she take to give them? Energy cones, yes. She'd already ordered a dozen on the 10-Tech account, and the mail bot had delivered them last week. Teresa hadn't understood the account very well. Usually Jackson took care of these things. She had used a proprietary password he'd once given her, but it must have been the wrong word, because the system thought she'd wanted access to factory records. She'd mucked around in them a while before realizing her mistake. She only hoped she hadn't caused malfunctions in any system anyplace. After she'd found the household accounts, though, she'd been able to figure out how to order what she wanted. It gave her an odd sense of power, which she immediately distrusted. Pride goeth before a fall. Her mother used to say that. Clothing. She should bring decent clothing. On the holovid, the Livers wore these awful homespun things, or else Jack's in truly terrible colors, but all her clothing was cotton or silk. That wouldn't do. The Livers were all changed, of course. They needed non-consumables. She went into Jackson's room and looted his wardrobe. Shirts, pants, tunics, coats, farrels, shoes. He could always order more, and next trip she'd bring some non-consumable women's clothes. What else? Oh, money, of course. But how did that work for Livers? They didn't use money. Or at least they hadn't before the change. They'd all had meal chips and ID cards, and the politicians had given them everything free in exchange for votes. Nobody voted anymore except for enclave elections. Well, of course not. That's why the Livers were in this position. They didn't have any money to buy the things they needed, so most of them just went south, where they didn't need heat or clothes, and fed out in the open, and got into stupid wars and forgot civilization entirely. But not all of them. The ones Teresa was going to visit could surely use money. But how do you sign over credit to people who don't have accounts? She'd bring a handheld terminal, a mobile. Maybe they had some sort of group account for the organization or something. Or maybe she could figure out how to set up one in their name, but with access to some of her money. That shouldn't be too hard. People must set up accounts on the net all the time. She could leave them the mobile. She could do this. She really could. For the first time in her life, after so many false starts, she, Teresa Catherine Aronow, could actually be useful to something larger than herself. The black cloud in her head didn't lift, but it lightened a little, and Teresa smiled. On her way out, she passed her main terminal. It was on, holding a screen of her book about one of the first Sleepless, Lisha Camden. Another false start. Teresa knew she wasn't much of a writer. The book wasn't very good. But she had wanted to write about Lisha, that outsider from her own people who'd fought so hard to keep Sleepless and Donkeys from splintering into two armed camps. Lisha had tried to keep the Sleepless from withdrawing into armed retreat in Sanctuary. She'd tried to keep Sleepers from boycotting all corporations invested in by Sleepless. She'd tried to keep Miranda Sharifi from the same kind of isolation that had driven Miranda's grandmother to treason. Lisha had failed at all of it. And then the Sleepless had engineered the super Sleepless, and everything got even worse. But Lisha had at least tried. What had driven Lisha, Teresa wondered, before she'd been murdered by outlaw Livers in a desolate Georgia swamp? Something must have driven Lisha. Some light she could see more clearly than Teresa had been able to do. At the elevator to the roof, her arms filled with a load of Jackson's expensive and perfectly tailored clothes, Teresa hesitated. It was so hard to go outside. So many new things. What if she had an attack? Maybe if she first watched a Drew Arlen concert, the one about taking risks. Drew Arlen, the lucid dreamer. There had been a period, several months long, during which Teresa had watched an Arlen concert 2 or 3 times each day. She'd let Arlen hypnotize her with his subliminals and programmed graphic shapes that seized the unconscious mind into a different kind of dreaming. Deep, personal, massaged into shape by Drew's art of mass hypnosis and universal symbols to which he seemed to have easy access. The dream became whatever the listener wanted it to be, needed it to be, and the dreamer awoke cleansed and stronger, like any other temporary drug. No, not today. She was not going to watch a Drew Arlen concert today, not use it like just another neurofarm. She could do this alone. She could. Today was the day. "Good morning, Miss Arenal," the elevator said. She let it swallow her. "Why you doing this, you?" "I wanted to... I saw you on the news grid about the attempts you're making to..." Teresa took a deep breath. The man wasn't tall, but he was thick and bearded and sunburned and scowling. He stood too close to her. 3 of them, 2 men and a woman, had run toward the car as soon as it landed, a respectful distance away from their building. What she hoped was a respectful distance. Her heart raced, and her breath snagged in her throat and wouldn't come out. Oh, not now, not now. She breathed deeply. The air outside was colder than she'd expected, and grayer. Everything out here, air, trees, ground, faces, looked cold and gray and hard. Teresa turned to the woman. Maybe a woman would be easier. "I know you're trying to do. The news grid said this was a spiritual experiment." What the news grid had actually said was a quasi-spiritual attempt at a completely irrelevant human delusion. The second man's face softened. He was younger, maybe Teresa's age, skinnier, unbearded. "You're interested, you, in our ways?" "Don't be taken in, Josh," the woman said sharply. "She's donkey, her." "Let's see us who she is," said the first man. From his pocket he pulled a mobile. Were livers supposed to have those? "On. ID check. Air car number 475-9886. Followed by code authorizations. How did he know those? The terminal said, "Car registered to Jackson William Arenal, Manhattan East Enclave." It added a citizen number and address. Teresa hadn't known those were public. "I'm Teresa Arenal, Jackson's sister." She tried to breathe normally. "And you brought us supplies, you," the woman said, "out of the goodness of your heart." "Yes," Teresa whispered. "I mean, no, I don't think I'm that good." "You all right, you?" the younger man said. "Josh." Teresa slumped against the car, and he touched her arm. She flinched. Yes, fine." "Josh, unload the supplies, you," said the other man. "Might as well have them, us." Teresa made herself breathe normally. She had come this far. "Could I please see what you're doing here? Not in exchange for the supplies, but just because I'm interested?" The woman said, "We don't need no spies, us," at the same moment that Josh said, "You really interested? In bonding?" "Shut up about that," the woman snapped. The two glared at each other. Teresa didn't remember anything about bonding in the news grid. She shivered in a sudden gust of wind. It was so cold. The older man made a sudden decision. "She can know, her. It's time people knew. We're doing what's right, us, and it's working, and we know that. We should spread the word, us." "Mike," the woman began angrily. "No, it's time. And if a donkey's really interested, her..." He eyed Teresa speculatively. "I say no, me," the woman said. "I say yes, me," Josh said. "Patty, grab some of those cones, you." Patty grabbed with bad grace. Teresa pulled some of Jackson's clothes from the car and walked with Josh toward the building, staying as far from Patty and Mike as she could. The building was a huge, flat, windowless rectangle, maybe once a warehouse of some kind. They didn't take her inside. Instead, they ducked in one by one to drop off their loads of cones and clothing. Then they led her around to the back of the building. Several more people followed, until there was a small crowd. Behind the building, a tent of clear plastic stretched over churned-up ground. The tent, held up at its center by spindly poles 4 feet high, sagged rapidly to edges held to the ground with temporary-looking stakes. Inside was a Y-cone, a feeding ground, and 6 naked people in 2 groups of 3 each. "See, you," Josh said, not ungently. "Bonded groups, them. Feeding in harmony. That 6 months ago were enemies, them." "Not enemies," Patty said sharply. "Not friends," Josh countered. "We had a lot of fighting, us. Like most tribes, it almost made us blow apart, us, go off alone, be isolated." "Which would mean that we was denying our humanity," Mike said. "Humans are meant to be together, us. Isolated, we ain't whole." "Oh," Teresa said. Was he right? This ragged, healthy-looking liver? Was that why her life had felt so empty? Because she'd isolated herself? Disappointment seeped through her. It seemed too simple, too easy. All those isolated, ecstatic mystics she'd read about in her library who saw visions and suffered for truth, they'd needed more than just more company. She searched for something to say that wouldn't offend her hosts. "How did you stop the fighting and get to be so unified?" "Bonding," Josh said triumphantly. "It was given to us by Mother Miranda, and we took it. And now look." "Mother Miranda?" Teresa said. "Are you the same as those people who insist Miranda Sharifi develop an immortality drug?" "No," Mike said. "We don't insist, us, on nothing. We don't ask for nothing. But we took the gift, us, when we found it." The gift. "What gift?" Josh answered, fervor in his voice. "At first we thought, us, it was more change syringes. But the new syringes were red, them, not black. And there was a hollow to play on our terminal. Miranda Sharifi telling us that this was a gift to start with us, then later go to everyone. The gift of bonding, to make up for the isolation of the change." "A hollow of Miranda Sharifi," Teresa repeated. Jackson had said that Miranda and her fellow supers had nano-built themselves a lunar base, Selene, after Jennifer Sharifi got out of prison and threw Miranda out of sanctuary. That had been over a year ago. How was Miranda sending new syringes from the moon? "With a new change," Mike said. "Bonding. So we can't ever be alone, us, again. So we have to develop the spiritual aspect of ourselves and get along together. In threes, like the Father and Son and Holy Ghost, them." Teresa looked again at the tented feeding ground. 3 people at one end, 2 women and a man. 3 at the other, a man and a woman and a young boy. Around her in the crowd, people stood grouped in threes, some groups holding hands. Patty and Mike and Josh had imperceptibly moved from opposite sides of Teresa to form a small huddle facing her. "A syringe," she said. "It held a new drug, and you took it and—" Patty spoke directly to Teresa, looking her full in the face, smiling brutally. "And the drug made us one, We can't move us too far away from each other. We are each other's life." The crowd suddenly intoned, "We are the life and the way. We are the life and the blood. We are the life and the chosen." Josh said eagerly, "You see now, you? We're a real community, us. The change syringe divided people, everybody able to go off by hisself, them, to eat and be healthy and live. Nobody needing anybody else. But the bonding syringe unites. If Mike or Patty or me get too far away from each other, us, we die." "Die?" Teresa faltered. "Really die?" Patty said triumphantly, "Really die. And a bonded group did, them, in another tribe. I saw it, me. The fools didn't believe Mother Miranda, and the Holy Ghost moved away her, and in one night the other 2 died."
But what if you have a baby? Does the baby?
We got lots more red syringes, us, Josh said. A baby ain't no problem. It just stay with its mother, him, until it's old enough to bond with his own group. Teresa felt sick. They wanted so badly to have a reason to need each other, to be a community, but this, it must be done with pheromones. Jackson had explained pheromones to her, chemicals given off into the air and smelled by other people even if they didn't realize. And the chemicals affected people's behavior. Maybe without the new smell, some poison was set off in the bonded person's body. But wouldn't the cell cleaner destroy any poison? Wasn't that what the cell cleaner was for? Of course, if Miranda Sharifi had really made them both, would Miranda Sharifi do that? Why? A part of Teresa's mind said softly, because they remade human bodies in their own image. Now the supers want to own human brains. No, that was Teresa's own brain, the part that was so afraid of new experiences and new things, the part that never wanted to leave the apartment. Xenophobia, inhibition, agoraphobia, novelty anxiety. Jackson had taught her the words. It was she who was mistaken, was blind, didn't recognize a path up to the light when she saw it. No, it wasn't her. What these people were doing was wrong. Her breath went ragged. Her heart raced. She felt the attack coming. Nausea, dizziness, the terror of not being able to breathe, and flailed one hand as if she could physically ward it off. Patty misinterpreted her gesture. You don't believe me, you? Then come see the hollow. No, please don't. Patty seized her arm and dragged her around the building and inside. Livers were there in threes, crowding close to her and breathing in her face, and it was dark, and her gorge rose, and Mother Miranda time! The hollow stage sprang to life. A pretty, meaningless swirl of color, and then Miranda Sharifi appeared, head and shoulders only, the background a plain, dark recording booth designed for anonymity. Miranda wore a sleeveless white suit. A red ribbon held back her unruly black hair. This is Miranda Sharifi, speaking to you from Selene. You will want to know what this new syringe is. It's a wonderful new gift, designed especially for you. A gift even better than the change syringes were. Those set you free biologically, but also led to much isolation when you no longer needed each other for food and survival. It's not good for a man to be alone. So this syringe, this wonderful gift. Beyond the hollow stage, in the corner of the warehouse, Teresa saw an unchanged child. About 2, the child sat propped in a corner, thin, flabby legs straight out. One side of its head was empty of hair, the skin eaten into circular patches oozing pus. Rheum trickled from its filmy eyes. Teresa's throat closed entirely. You, my chosen people, the first to know the life and the way. The child whimpered. A girl no older than Teresa darted forward and picked it up. A strong, healthy liver girl, free of hunger and disease, who could stand by herself and see from clear eyes. Was the unchanged child? Could it be in actual pain? Spiritual gift, the life and the way. She couldn't breathe. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't breathe. Building on the work of the change syringe I first gave you years ago when... Couldn't breathe, and she was going to die. This time she would really die. What's the matter with the donkey, her? What's wrong, you? Give her some room. She's dying, her. People don't die them, you asshole. Hollow's done. Inject her. There ain't nobody them to be in her group. Yes, the 2 new people, them, Kathy and Earl. Inject them all 3. Inject them. The room spun crazily. It went black in a deep swooping wave, as if someone had jerked the far wall, and the wave rushed toward her. In a minute it would take her. Put your head between your knees, Jackson's voice said inside her head. Breathe deeply. Take a neuropharm. She doubled over. Two people pulled her upright, one on either side of her, her new bonded group. In the spinning room, a syringe whirled into view in somebody's hand, bright red. No, Teresa screamed. No, don't. It's all right, honey, a woman's voice said soothingly. Her coat was pulled off. It don't hurt. Just like another change needle. You won't hardly feel it, you. Mother Miranda says that it just builds on the first change. The red syringe swam closer to her arm. The room whirled, and the dark wave washed over her. Dizzy, faint, she was going to throw up. At the last minute, she pulled the words somewhere out of herself. I'm not changed. And the blackness took her. Outside. She was lying on the ground outside, and it was cold. She wasn't wearing her coat. She opened her eyes, and the sunlight hurt them. People stood around her in groups, their ugly faces gazing down at her. In a group, Kathy and Earl and Teresa. She was bonded. She's coming back, her. Give her some room, damn it! Don't give the bitch nothing, us. Teresa, you're not bonded, you. We didn't do it. Josh, squatting beside her, not touching her. Teresa concentrated on her breathing. Sometimes the attacks came in twos or even threes. The very thought made her heart race and her breath shorten. I said, me, that we didn't bond you. Josh's face was kind. How could that be kindness from a liver? He couldn't understand what happened to her. Not even Jackson understood. Teresa tried to breathe deeply. Patty said, It must be true, what we heard, us, that even the enclaves don't have no more change syringes. Her tone was slyly pleased. Teresa sat up. Home. She had to go home. Would they let her go home? What would they do to her? Tears filled her eyes. Oh, God, she's crying, her, Patty said. Let the bitch go. Mike said, No, wait. She's got a mobile. She knows entry codes we could use, us. She don't know nothing, her. Look at her. She ain't even changed. So? She's got stuff in her head. She's a donkey. Josh leaned close to her. Teresa flinched. His breath was sweet and warm, but somehow alien. He said, very low, Get up, you, while they're arguing. Get in your car and go. She looked at him wildly. He nodded once, pulled her to her feet, and whispered something in her ear. Mike and Patty had started pushing each other, their faces contorted, their words coming out in spittle at the corners of their mouths. Teresa ran toward her car. Stop her, Mike called. Stop, you! Teresa lurched and fell. Her breath came hard. The ground shook and grasped. Not again. Not another attack. She forced herself to her feet and looked back over her shoulder. Patty and Mike were trying to chase her, but every time they got a few yards from Josh, they stopped, ran back, and tried to pull him along. Josh made himself heavy and limp as rags, and Mike and Patty couldn't chase Teresa without him. She stumbled to the car and collapsed inside. Door lock! Automatic! Takeoff! Home coordinates! The car lifted. Below, she saw Patty's slug Josh. Teresa fell back against the seat, trying to control her breathing, trying to stop the world below from spinning into another of the sickening black waves. Home. She had to get home. She should never have left, should never have come out of the enclave, should never have thought she was strong enough or worthy enough to actually find out something about the light. She was just a defective, overprivileged donkey. No. Those people were wrong. That wasn't the way, courting death to force you into community. No, no, no. Not like that. The answer wasn't like that. She closed her eyes. It shut out the spinning world, but it couldn't shut out the thing scarier than that. the most terrifying thing she'd seen in an afternoon of terror, inner and outer. Josh's face, whispering a final sentence. Kind, regretful, horrifying. His words. "You ain't ready, you. Least not yet." Teresa shuddered. She never would be ready for that. Bound forever 10 feet from 2 livers, death if she left them? No. It was wrong. A dead end. But what was Miranda Sharifi doing? And what was Teresa going to do? She was again alone with her empty life. Interlude. Transmission date, December 1st, 2120. To Selene Base, Moon. Via San Diego Ground Station, GEO Satellite, C-988, U.S. Hall Sat 4, Egypt. Message type, unencrypted. Message class, Class B, private paid transmission. Originating group, San Diego Parents Coalition. Message, Dr. Miranda Sharifi and Associates. Knowing, as we do, that you firmly embody the principle that people are never more themselves than when they make choices for others, we approach you with a request. Your gift of change syringes has transformed our lives. Thanks to your efforts, our children are healthier and stronger. But the supply of change syringes in our enclave, as in the others, is dwindling. Soon it will be non-existent. Children born after that must be vulnerable to disease, to accidental poisoning, to danger. Dr. Sharifi, please don't permit this to happen. Our children are so precious to us. They are all of our futures. You have been so compassionate and benevolent to your fellow beings that we, the parents of San Diego Enclave, ask you to be so again. We ask for more change syringes for the children as yet unborn to us. Let this be, from your deep knowledge of humanity, your first scientific goal. We ask not for ourselves, but for the children. Acknowledgement? None received. 5. They had been flying over Africa for less than half an hour when the plane began to descend. Jennifer Sharifi gazed out the window. In the pink dawn, the outlines of a city blurred, as if the buildings might or might not actually be there. Heisenberg uncertainty principle, she thought, and didn't smile. "Atar," Will Sandalero said, and stretched as much as he could in the cramped confines of the 4-seater Mitsu Boeing. 2 days ago, Jennifer and he had come down from Sanctuary, their first time down in the 4 months since they'd returned from Earth to the Sleepless orbital. All signs of Miranda and the other supers had been obliterated from Sanctuary. The friends convicted with Jennifer had also returned to Sanctuary, their shorter sentences long since finished. Carolyn Renly and Paul Alioni and Cassie Blumenthal and the rest, back to finish the fight for freedom. But only Jennifer and Will had made this trip down to the International Shuttle Port in Madeira. They had gone directly to the Machado Hotel, built and owned by Sanctuary through a complex series of blind holding companies, a luxury business hotel guaranteeing unbreakable security for orbital and Terran executives. For 2 days they had stayed in their Y-shielded room while hotel staff, half sleepless, half well-paid norms, had determined the identity of all the agents, reporters, terrorists, and nuts inevitably trailing Jennifer Sharifi. Last night, Jennifer and Will had left the Machado by an underground tunnel built along with the hotel and so well shielded that only 10 people in the world knew it existed. A car had taken them to the coast and the Mitsu Boeing. Will, used to exercise, was restless after 3 days in vehicles and shielded rooms. Jennifer was never restless. She had learned to sit completely still and retreat into her thoughts for hours, for days, for months. Will would have to learn too. It was a necessary discipline to gather everything inside and bring it to a single point, like sunlight focused by a motionless magnifying glass, a burning point. "They'll be waiting," she said over the back of the seat to the pilot. He nodded. His brown hair, gray eyes, stolid features could have come from 5 different continents. He never spoke. Beside him, the sleepless bodyguard, Gunnar Grolnick, checked his weapons. The plane landed on a dusty, unmarked landing field in the desert, a tar barely visible on the dawn horizon. The only building, a windowless foam-cast rectangle, curiously pristine and dustless under a Y-shield, might have existed anywhere in the world. The air was colder than Jennifer remembered, this close to the equator, but the sun wasn't up yet. Later, the air would be hot. 3 men awaited them, dressed in light Arab robes, non-consumable synthetics, Jennifer saw. They were all changed. In Africa, you never knew. The men had swarthy, sunburned skins, but light eyes, 2 green, 1 blue. The one with blue eyes had red hair, neither gene mod nor fashion augment. Berbers. "Welcome to Mauritania," the oldest of the men said to Will, in nearly unaccented English. He did not glance at Jennifer. She had expected this. She said nothing. "I am Karim. This is Ali and Bashir. Did you enjoy a good flight?" "Yes, thank you," Will said. "No complications?" "We were not followed." "We detected nothing at this end," Karim said, "but it is best not to linger. Please follow me." The pilot remained with the plane. The other 6 climbed into a large air car, Will and Jennifer in the back seat with Gunnar between them. They flew low, traveling deeper into the Sahara, which grew more sunlit every minute. Rocks, scrub vegetation, an occasional oasis, its green stopping with the irrigation system as abruptly as if sheared with scissors. Then no vegetation, just rock and sand. They landed beside a small foam-cast building whose domed shield was half buried in drifting sand. The Arabs landed the car inside the dome on hard, packed ground free of blowing sand. The building opened through retina scan, Jennifer noted. An underground German company had recently developed software to duplicate retina coding. The Berbers would need to update their security. The elevator spoke briefly in Arabic. Will gave no sign he did not understand the language. Jennifer understood Arabic, although she too gave no sign. But of course the Berbers knew what languages she spoke or understood. They knew everything about all 3 of their sleepless visitors, everything in any databank anywhere, which was never the information most crucial to have. Sleepers never understood that. Jennifer stood close to them, for the discipline, and made her hatred focus calmly, a controlled burn, for the discipline. The elevator. "The peace of Allah go with you," might or might not be a piece of satirical programming. If satire, it was a weakness. Satire indicated the ability to stand outside your own endeavors and mock them. If not satire, it indicated the strength of tradition. Mauritania had a lot of traditions. Proud Berber nomads, Islam, colonial oppression, collapse and drought and plague and warfare and brutality, like all of Africa, but more so. Mauritania had been the last country in Africa to outlaw slavery, less than 200 years ago. The slavery had persisted, joined by newer outlaws and newer genetic and technological slaves. Mauritania had no government left to speak of. What did exist was easily bought. The elevator stopped far underground. It opened directly into a conference room, all gleaming nano-built white walls and the fragrant smell of strong coffee. Doors led, presumably, to the labs and living quarters. On the gleaming teak table, surrounded by comfortable chairs, stood a silver coffee service. More chairs ringed the walls. A low side table held a hollow stage. Jennifer took a chair at the side of the room, sitting with downcast eyes. This had been the result of negotiation carried on through Will. The Berbers, shrewd businessmen in their unforgiving environment for 3 millennia, had adapted easily to being brokers for the international underground. They were less willing to adapt to female entrepreneurs. Had Jennifer been any other woman in the world, she would not have been allowed in the room at all. Any other woman but one, Miranda, who had betrayed her people and made this interaction with Sleeper's scum necessary in the first place. Will and the Berbers sat at the polished teak table. Gunnar remained standing back to the wall between Jennifer and the elevator so that he could survey everything. "Coffee?" Karim asked. "Yes, please," Will said. "Where is Dr. Strukov?" "He will join us in just a few minutes. We are a bit early." The coffee looked dark, rich, bitter. Jennifer's mouth watered. She made the saliva stop. The three Berbers drank leisurely, not talking, seemingly completely at ease. But even Karim stiffened slightly when a door opened and Sergei Mikhailovich Strukov entered. The legendary Russian genius was huge, clearly gene mod for size. His skin had the characteristic glowing health of the changed. The syringes had, of course, been dropped in Ukraine as well as everywhere else on Earth, but how widely they were used wasn't known. Not only had Ukraine closed all its borders tight, but the weird anti-technology cults that had flourished there since the limited nuclear wars had greatly slowed any use of the net. What wasn't on the net couldn't be dipped. Much of Eastern Europe and Western Asia was unknown even to Sanctuary. But not Strukov. He was known everywhere, seen nowhere. He had escaped from Ukraine at 17, ignorant of microbiology, but somehow gene mod for IQ. He never spoke of his parents, his background, his adolescence, or how he came to speak not only Russian, but idiomatic Chinese and fluent, although accented, French. By 22, he had a PhD in microbiology from the Centre d'études du polymorphisme humain in Paris. At 31, he won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for his work on genetically modified excitotoxins in neuromitochondria. He never showed up in Stockholm to accept the prize. 3 months later, he walked out of his lab in Paris and disappeared. Over the next decade, odd reports of Strukov surfaced on the underground net. Hints that he was working for the Chinese, for Egypt, for Brazil, always on biological warfare, always on gene mod projects that never quite surfaced on the world news grids, or never quite went away. A microbiologist in the San Francisco Bay Enclave declared he recognized Strukov's hand in a nasty piece of gene mod sent him from a doctor in the Chilean conflict, a deadly retrovirus that destroyed memory formation in the hippocampus. A week later, the microbiologist drowned in the bay. Strukov sat at the head of the table. Then, pointedly ignoring Will, he swiveled his chair to look directly at Jennifer. She didn't raise her eyes to his, but he went on looking anyway. 5 seconds, 10, 15 seconds. She could feel the tension in the room shoot upward. Finally, Strukov turned back to the men at the table. He was smiling faintly. "What is it that Sanctuary desires next of me?" His English carried a heavy Russian accent, but the sentence structure was not Russian, mentally translated from French, Jennifer guessed. Will looked less composed than Strukov. "You've already been informed what we want." "I wish to hear your words." "We want," Will said a little too sharply, "for you to modify the gene mod virus you've already developed. The trials we received aren't satisfactory." "And why is it that Sanctuary, in possession of the most fine laboratories of the science in the solar system, yourself cannot modify this virus?" "There are reasons," Will said, "that we prefer not to." "I am able to guess. Sanctuary is run by the communal decision, isn't it? And many of your people must be opposed to whatever it is you plan. Many more must be in ignorance of your plans. Also, your labs on Sanctuary are arranged for the genetic modifying of the embryos, and for the research into that area. You are not arranged for the creation and the delivery of the deadly viruses." Will said nothing. Strukov threw back his head and laughed, a great open laugh that filled the room. Karim smiled. Jennifer Sharifi and Will Sandaleros had gone to prison for trying to hold 5 American cities ransom with a deadly gene-mod virus. Strukov said, 28 years changes much, isn't it? And not only in the microbiology. And yet, even so, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. You wish to try again this assault on the American government? No, Will said. But what we do with the virus is our business. Yours, as we initially agreed, is to deliver it. Piece of cake, Strukov said, clearly savoring the cliché. Kareem laughed. Maybe not, Will said. You don't yet know everything our modification requires. Permit me, then, to show to you the modifications I already have created, Strukov said. Angélique, commencez. Le programme de démontrer. Oui, said the system. The hollow stage came to life. A 3-dimensional model of the human brain, in light gray, surrounded by a ghostly outline of skull. 2 almond-shaped areas the size of a baby's thumbnail, located just behind the ears, suddenly glowed red. The right and left amygdalae, Strukov said. They rest themselves on the interior underside of the temporal lobes. Both amygdalae are in essentials identical. Angélique, ça va. The left amygdala suddenly expanded, filling the whole deck and replacing the brain. It became a complicatedly elaborated tangle of neurons, densely packed with input and output nerves branching outward. Strukov said, the neurotransmitter of dominance in the amygdalae is glutamate. It is an interesting amino acid. Subtle metabolic changes can turn glutamate into an excitotoxin that kills neurons in the hypothalamus, a part of the brain one uses in memory formation. Poor transport of glutamate can kill neurons in the brain and spinal cord. Overstimulation of glutamate production leads to many chronic diseases of degeneration. Jennifer's expression did not change. This was basic, common information. Strukov was overestimating her ignorance. Error or insult? Will said, but any metabolic changes that created a toxin would be dealt with by the cell cleaner. It would destroy toxins as fast as they were created. And overproduction is the result of faulty DNA coding that would be corrected by the cell cleaner as soon as it was detected. True, Strukov said. This is why the diseases such as Huntington's and ASL have disappeared themselves. Also the accidental poisoning. But the amygdala does more. Angélique, ça va. The hollow model changed to a cluster of a dozen magnified cells, long axons and dendrites curling close to each other. Structures in and on the cell membranes glowed yellow and orange. The yellow receptor sites are called AMPA receptors. The orange ones are NMDA receptors. AMPA receptors activate themselves in response to glutamate and cause the startle reaction. Suddenly, the cell hollow disappeared. In its place, a laser cannon appeared, swiveled, and fired directly at Will. A blast of noise deafened everybody. Gunnar reacted instantly, throwing a Y-shield around Will and Jennifer, drawing his own gun. The laser cannon was only a hollow. Strukov threw back his head and bellowed his huge laugh. Like that! You reacted with the fear. Pulse, blood pressure, adrenaline rush, isn't it? Your AMPA receptors lit up like the trees of Christmas. I don't appreciate being made part of your demonstration, Will said stiffly. Jennifer watched. But it demonstrates the issue, yes? However, more exists here. The AMPA receptors that created your fear response clear themselves rapidly after the fear is finished. The neural reaction is temporary. You did not stay afraid after you realized that the cannon was not real, and your NMDA receptors did not activate themselves. Those receptors are different. What it is that activates them is a fear response of the high and prolonged stress, and then the NMDA receptors bond the experience together. The neural pathways created in this fashion are permanent. What do you mean, bond experiences together? Watch. Angélique, ça va? This is real-time recording. The laser cannon was replaced by a large transparent Y-energy cage outlined by thin black plastic struts. The cage held 2 white mice. At the far end, the shield collapsed, and a cat wearing a bright red collar rushed in. The cat pounced on one of the mice, which let out an agonized squeal. The cat bit down. Blood spurted from the mouse, which screamed at such a high pitch that Jennifer's ears hurt. With one paw, the cat reached out and carelessly, nonchalantly, raked its extended claws across the back of the other mouse, cowering in a transparent corner. Now, Strukov said, a week later. The same cage with the same mouse. Its back showed fresh scars. The same cat entered, wearing the same bright red collar. The mouse immediately showed intense fear, both cowering and baring its teeth. Evidently a Y-energy shield invisibly divided the cage in two. The cat could not advance more than halfway toward the mouse, which continued to exhibit fear. 3 months later, Strukov said. Same mouse, the scars further healed. A hand entered from the top of the cage, holding a bright red leather collar. Immediately, the mouse exhibited intense fear. Now, this is merely the Pavlov response, yes? The mouse associates the collar with the fear. This is the same as a man in the combat, who 25 years later hears a loud noise and throws himself flat on the ground. The experience of the loud noise and the deadly danger are bonded in his brain, and the amygdala is the place this happens. But now it becomes interesting. The mouse's amygdalae have both been removed. Same mouse. The cat entered. The mouse looked up, saw the cat, went back to sniffing aimlessly at its cage. It wandered toward the cat, which immediately pounced and killed it. Will said, no amygdala, no fear. No remembered fear, Strukov said. The instinctive fear is still able to be induced, as, for example, throwing the mouse from a great height and monitoring its bioresponses on the way down. The fear of the falling is instinctive, but the remembered fear depends on the NMDA receptors in the amygdalae. They lay down a permanent neural pathway, the same as some drugs of the street, which in turn permanently alters the reaction. The organism cannot not feel the fear at the proper stimulus. Angélique, ça va? The cluster of amygdala neurons reappeared. Now glowing lines connected various yellow and orange receptor sites. In addition, Strukov said, I am able to make the process go the other way. With the correct viral modifications to trigger, injected into the blood or the cerebrospinal fluid, the natural excitatory transmitters, such as glutamate, among many others, can be turned into the excitotoxins. Thus, the fear pathways can be created even without a prior experience. Of course, they are not memory-specific, since there has existed no memory. There is no input from the hippocampus, but the fear pathways are permanent because they do not depend on the molecules remaining in the brain. The cell cleaner can come along 2 minutes after injection, but voila, the NMDA pathways have already been forged. Also, the metabolic process that changes the neural structure is marvelously complex, and so the variations possible are marvelously varied. I am able to create the permanent reactions for the fairly specific fears, if the basic instinctual response is genetically encoded. Angélique, ça va? Another real-time recording. Jennifer could tell from the quality of the hollow. An Arab teenage boy, not gene mod for appearance, pimply, gangly, shuffling his feet. He sat in a small, nondescript room, playing a game on a hollow terminal. Strukov entered the room and pressed a wall button. An entire wall dissolved, opening the room to a garden with an inviting stream and tall date palms. The boy turned ashen. His breathing raced and his chest rose and fell. In panic, he whirled away from the garden and pushed his face against the opposite wall, trembling and moaning. No, 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 no! The agoraphobia, Strukov said. Permanent? Will asked. Probably, unless he undertakes either the intense personal behavior modification or the corrective pharmacology, which his cell cleaner will of course destroy unless it renews itself constantly. One will need either another gene mod virus or many, many patches each week. How hard would that be to create? Strukov shrugged. For whom? For the usual doctors? Impossible. For a good research facility of the medicine? Difficult, but not impossible. For your granddaughter, Miranda Sharifi, and her super Sleepless? Who can tell? Angelique Sava. The display showed a young girl, 11 or 12, not Arab, with uncombed hair and skinny arms. With her was a woman in her 60s who sat placidly reading. The girl roamed restlessly around the room, touching the walls, windows, terminals, toys, but stopping to use nothing. Every few seconds she touched the woman, as if reassuring herself that the other was still there. Her face, un-gene mod, but pretty, crinkled in constant anxiety. The fear of the abandonment, Strukov said with satisfaction. She cannot bear to be alone by herself. Watch. The older woman rose from her chair, laid down her book, and said, Nathalie, je vais à la cabinet de toilette. Non, non, Émilie, s'il vous plaît. Une minute seulement, chérie. Non, vous ne sautez pas. The girl clutched desperately at Émilie. Gently, the woman unwrapped her clinging arms. Nathalie threw her arms around Émilie's legs, starting to cry. Émilie detached herself and went into a bathroom, closing and locking the door. Nathalie burst into loud sobbing and curled into the fetal position on the floor. Jennifer glimpsed the girl's face. It was a mask of anxiety and fear. After a few moments, Émilie came out of the bathroom. Nathalie crawled over to her and again threw her arms around the older woman's knees. Strukov said, The fear of being alone. Will said, Does she have to be with this particular person? But no, Strukov said, smiling. She is exactly the same with anyone in the room. She is comfortable and free of the anxiety only when the room holds many people, and all appear prepared to stay for many hours. Then and only then the fear of the abandonment is eased. Angelique, ça va? But this one you have already seen, isn't it? You have decided against this. An American liver town in early fall. Trees blazed with color. 3 ragged people stood close together on an empty, nano-paved road. From their contorted faces and waving arms, they were arguing fiercely. One man shoved the other. The woman stalked away, shouting at them both over her shoulder into a nearby woods. There was a close-up of her shocked face as 2 hollow-suited men grabbed her and forced her into a small air car. They called it the bonding, Strukov said mockingly. But you know that better than me, isn't it? You yourself made the hollow the peasants have watched. After they saw it, they injected themselves with the red syringes, and so they became bonded. Now then, this is 3 hours since the woman is carried away. The abducted woman sat alone in a comfortable room. Abruptly, she gasped, clutched her chest, and slid off her chair. Her eyes stared in death. The hollow superimposed a RoboCam shot of the 2 men who had bonded with her, also dead. An electrical event in the heart, Strukov said. A very clean mechanism, very elegant. I like this technique to control your peasants. Render them very dependent on each other, and their actions can be only very limited, yes? A good design. But you do not choose this design. You tell me, leave this attempt, give me something different. Will didn't answer directly. This whole range of fears you can induce permanently. The biochemistry dictates they're all as pronounced as these 2 examples. But no, These NMDA receptors have been strongly activated. They have created the neural pathways of the great strength. It is possible to create the lesser effects. Will said, "Is it possible for you to create them?" "But of course." Angelique Sava. The hollow stage switched to screen mode. Screen after screen of charts, equations, molecular diagrams, chemical formulas, tables of variables, and ion reaction schematics flashed past, as maliciously complex as the previous demonstrations had been simplistic. Strukov said, "Much of the work on the fear and the anxiety has concerned itself with the synapses, the neurotransmitters, and the receptor subtypes. I have concerned myself more with the processes of the cellular stress inside the nerve cells, where the neuropeptides form themselves. Here is where the chemical reactions originate and conclude. Each pyramidal neuron receives as many as 100,000 contacts from those neurons to which they connect. One therefore begins with models of the nerve transmission. And with one other thing. There exist the peptides that form themselves only under the pathological conditions. It is possible to instigate a chain reaction of the complex amines beginning inside a cell. Some amines in the chain are pathological, some are normal, some are the endogenous excitatory amino acids, transformed into the excitotoxins. This chain, it has its beginning in the altered pathways of the amygdalae. From there, it extends itself through the central nerve nucleus to the interiors of the cells in many other places, in the brain, in the muscles, in the glands, and the organs. The chain ends in affecting many bioamines, including the acetylcholine. Look at this chart here. The norepinephrine, the CRF, the glutamate, the critical gamma-C, many amines. Moreover, that chain will go on constantly once begun by the triggering virus. And since the chain consists of the substances entirely created by the brain itself, the stupid cell cleaner does not attack them. It will destroy the virus, but by that time it is too late. The chain has begun. And according to the stupid cell cleaner, the chain belongs there. According to the stupid cell cleaner, the chain is native. Strukov laughed. And so it is. Will said, "And all human brains will respond the same way to the initiating virus?" Strukov shrugged. "Of course not. The people always differ in their response to anything that impacts the biogenic amines. Some will sicken, some will respond too strongly, a few will not respond at all, but most will become what you have requested me to make them. Inhibited, fearful of anything new, filled with the anxiety at any separation from the familiar, like the babies with the stranger anxiety. In the essence, my chain reaction brings forward as primary a more primitive function of the brain, which human growth suppresses in favor of the more complex functions. I reverse that." Strukov looked directly at Jennifer and smiled. "I will, in its finality, turn your target population into a nation of the fearful children." Jennifer gazed back. She had to fight showing her revulsion for the huge bearded giant completely absorbed in his own genius, completely at ease with its demonstration on his own people. Jennifer had always known that sleepers had no loyalty to their own, no moral sense. They would do anything to each other, if enough money was involved. Nor were they capable of distinguishing between the prison term served by Jennifer, a penalty born of the sleeper's fear of her and of her own sense of moral obligation to safeguard her own, and the prison term that would be served by this brilliant vermin if his brain tampering was discovered by sleeper authorities. Strukov was a disease. She would use a disease to protect her people if she had to, but she would not give a disease the moral courtesy of tradition. She stood, eyes meeting Strukov's. "And you can deliver the triggering gene mod virus by injection without detection?" "I have said so," Strukov said, amused, as the three Arabs rose angrily to their feet. "The vector contains 16 different proteins, 5 of which never before have existed. All will be destroyed by the cell cleaner long before any scientific authorities can isolate and culture them. Kareem said to Will, "We had an agreement about who will speak at this meeting." "Injection will not do for us," Jennifer said to Strukov. He answered, smiling, "Your granddaughter remade the human body, and you will remake the human mind, isn't it?" "What we do is not your concern," Jennifer said, at the same moment that Bashir said hotly to Will, "Control your wife!" Strukov said, "Do you speak always in the first-person plural, Madame Sharifi? What delivery of the virus do you require, and on what schedule?" "Two different delivery modes. One developed and tested as soon as possible, the other to follow a month later." "And those two modes of the delivery are?" She told him. 6. Jackson woke to the sure knowledge that someone was moving around his bedroom in the dark. A dream? No. The intruder was real, and not a bot. A dim human blur across the room, passing briefly in front of the semi-opaque window. Teresa? She didn't come into his room at night, and if she did, she'd turn on the light. He lay still, simulating the deep breathing of sleep, and considered his choices. He could call for building security, but not even the neurofarm option would take effect before the intruder shot Jackson at the sound of his voice. He could roll off the bed, keeping it between himself and the window, and try to reach the personal security shield in the bottom dresser drawer. Or was it the second bottom drawer? He pictured himself fumbling naked through his socks and underwear, groping for the thing while the intruder politely waited. Yes, sure. He could lunge off the bed and try to tackle the intruder, counting on surprise to keep from getting shot. In the seconds it took him to decide, the intruder said, "Lights on," and the room lit up. "Hello, Jackson, darling," Cassie said. She was naked and covered with mud. It caked on her pubic muff, smeared across her full breasts, fell off in wet globs onto his white carpet. Immediately, Jackson felt his penis stiffen. What if he'd made an idiot of himself by calling for security? "God damn it, Cassie, what the hell do you think you're doing?" "You're going to like what I'm doing, Jack. We're going to a party. I left it just to come and get you." She moved closer to the bed, and he could see her green-flecked eyes. She was on something, and it was a hell of a lot stronger than Indoor Kiss. She caught his frown and held out the inhaler. "Want a whiff?" "No." "Then let's go to the party." She yanked the blanket off Jackson's bed. Mud from her hands smeared the non-consumable fabric. "Oh, look, you're all ready. You always could get hard fast, Jack. I do like that. Come on, let's go. They're waiting." He yanked the blanket back from her, feeling like a fool. "I'm not going anywhere." "Oh, yes, you are," she purred. She let go of the disputed blanket, threw herself on top of him, and kissed him ferociously. He couldn't help himself. His arms went around her, and his tongue shot into her open mouth. His cock felt ready to burst. Cassie laughed, her mouth still on his, and pushed him away. She was stronger than he remembered. Clumsily, still laughing, she rolled off the bed and started for the door. "Not here, Jack." "Come on, you don't want to miss the party." "Cassie, wait." He heard her run lightly through the apartment and tell the front door to open. Jackson grabbed his pants and pulled them on. Barefoot and bare-chested, he ran after her, hoping they didn't wake Teresa. Cassie had disappeared. Jackson yanked open the front door. "Have a good evening, Dr. Aronow," the door said to him. "Shall I cancel your wake-up call?" "Yes," Jackson said. "No. Cassie!" She'd already gone into the elevator. It closed. As he watched helplessly, the door opened again. She stood there naked and muddy and smiling, lowering the inhaler. "Come on in, Jack. The water's fine." "Shall I wait, Dr. Aronow?" the elevator asked. "Or are you staying on this floor?" Jackson stumbled into the elevator. Cassie laughed. "6th floor, please." "Cassie, you're naked." "And you're not. But we can fix that. Isn't it lucky the party's right in your building?" She reached out one hand, hooked it into the top of his pants, and pulled him toward her. She undid the single clasp he'd had time to fasten when the elevator stopped and the door opened. "6th floor, Ms. Sanders," the elevator said. "Have a nice evening." "Cassie!" "Come on, Jack, we're late." She ran down the hall, shedding mud. Cursing, Jackson followed. He should go home right now. The cheeks of her ass, smeared with mud, flashed alternately. Left, right, left, right. Her ass was firm, but not so firm that it didn't jiggle as she ran. Jackson followed. The party was at Terry Amory's. Jackson knew Terry, but not well. The door was open. Cassie led him through a pseudo-Asian minimalist decor to the dining room. "He's here! Let the games begin!" "And just in time," Terry drawled. "We were going to start without you. Hello, Jackson. Welcome to the Psycho Bank." 6 naked people, 3 men and 3 women, lolled on a feeding ground the size of Jackson's bedroom. Water had been churned into the custom mixed organic loam. The resulting mud was thick, rich, and subtly perfumed. The wall program displayed earth tones, grays and tans and ochres, with dissolving and reforming cave paintings. Stalactites, probably hollows, hung from the ceiling. 2 of the women sprawled carelessly across one of the men, who, Jackson saw, was Landau Carson, tonight not wearing bees. Landau and Terry were the only people Jackson recognized. The woman not lying on Landau, a tall, slim redhead with bright blue eyes, said to Jackson, "Well, take your pants off, darling. They don't look very edible." Jackson considered leaving, but Cassie inhaled again from whatever was scrambling her brain. The little fool. Did she even know what was in the inhaler? Didn't she know there were street drugs that did permanent damage to the brain, altering neural pathways before the cell cleaner had a chance to destroy them? "Give me the inhaler, Cassie." To his surprise, she did, holding it meekly out to him. When he reached for it, she shoved him into the feeding ground. Fury tore through Jackson. Let her warp her brain. Let her fuck every single one of these diseases of both genders. She was sick, less mentally healthy than Teresa, and with far less reason. Let her go to hell. He had hauled himself out of the mud to leave when he saw the knives. 12 of them, stuck in an orderly blades-down row into a molded stand. The hilts were all shaped differently, ornamented with crudely carved animals that echoed the cave paintings of the wall programming. Throwing knives, but not well balanced, deliberately. "I've got the paint," the redhead said. She sniffed from an inhaler. "Who's first?" "Neophytes first," Cassie said. "First me and then Jackson." "Here," Terry crooned. "Let me assist you, as said Cro-Magnon to the Neanderthal. Nice." He dipped his hand in the pot and smeared paint the color of dried blood on both Cassie's nipples, then liberally on the fuzzy, muddy mound between her thighs. Cassie smiled. The redhead handed her a belt with a small dark button in the front. Fumbling, laughing, Cassie strapped it around her waist and pushed the button. Jackson saw the faint shimmer of a personal Y shield spring around her. Cassie slogged through the mud to the opposite side of the room. She stood flat against the wall under a stalactite, arms straight at her side after one more whiff from the inhaler. Terry said, "Host's prerogative, ladies and gentlemen," and reached for the knife stand. Jackson thought rapidly. If the shield was standard, and it looked like it was, a knife would not pierce it. Terry might aim for the painted areas of Cassie's exposed body, but the exposure wasn't real. It was just play acting, a fake thrill, the simulation of danger. Pleasure or pain? Terry mused theatrically. His hand hovered over one knife after another. Pain or pleasure? And for such a beautiful body, too, so full and ripe. Pleasure or pain? He chose a knife. As Terry pulled it free of the stand, Jackson saw that the knife blade, too, was encased in the shimmer of a Y energy shield. Sudden cold prickled the base of his spine. The redhead sank into the mud on her belly, wriggled in the depression her body made, and rolled onto her back streaked with mud. She raised herself on her elbows to get a better view of Cassie. Her conical breasts rose and fell with her breathing. Terry threw the knife, and Cassie screamed. Jackson scrambled forward across the mud, but Cassie wasn't hurt. The knife was embedded in the dining room wall, and Cassie laughed down at Jackson. "Fooled you, darling." Before he could react, Terry threw another knife. Jackson saw it fly through the air. It was unbalanced. The knives were designed to be hard to make a hit with. And strike Cassie's left breast, to the left of the painted nipple. The knife bounced off her shield and fell into the mud. "No points," the redhead said. "Bad, bad, bad aim, Terry darling." "One more throw," said the man Jackson didn't know. "Cassie's friend, get out of the way, please. We can't see, and some of us are too entangled to move." "I may never move again," said one of the two women lying twisted around Landau Carson. "Oh, do that again, Landau." A third knife whistled through the air, missed Cassie, and embedded itself in the wall. "3 strikes and you're out, Terry," Landau said. "I'm next." "As thrower?" "Garrot the thought. As target, of course." Landau took Cassie's place against the wall. Cassie flopped down in the mud on her belly and used her inhaler. Jackson watched the green-eyed redhead select a knife with much dramatic deliberation and hurl it at Landau's genitals. It hit and bounced off into the mud. Landau said. "Nice." Cassie said, "You know you can't feel it through your shield, Landau. Irina, 3 points." She lifted the inhaler again. Her eyes were shiny. Irina threw a second knife. It missed. "Oh, don't hiccup now," Landau said. "Hit me, lover." She did. The third knife struck right above Landau's erect cock. Everyone laughed and cheered. 6 points, Terry called. "Irina, what do you choose?" Irina gazed, smiling, at Landau. He looked back expectantly. Jackson felt the subtle shift in the room, a different kind of tension, tauter and hotter. Irina said, "I choose to take the knife myself." Landau looked disappointed, but there was something else in the disappointment, Jackson thought, something incongruous. Relief? He looked again at the stand of knives encased in their shimmering shields. Why shields? "Wait," Cassie said. "Don't choose yet, Irina. Terry, help me, you slug." Cassie and Terry gathered the 6 thrown knives from the mud. As they squished through the thick sludge, Terry smeared a quick proprietary glob across Cassie's back. Suddenly, Jackson knew that Terry had already had sex with Cassie earlier, as part of the general mud-rolling foreplay to the knife game. Jackson's chest constricted and burned. "Okay, that's all of them," Terry said. "Irina, choose." 12 knives, 6 gleaming and 6 muddy, stood phallic in their stand. Irina knelt before them in the mud, lips pursed, drawing out her moment of choice. The others watched, mud frosting their beautiful jean-mod bodies, faces keen and hot-eyed. Landau rubbed his fingers across his clavicle. One of the women caught her bottom lip between her teeth. "This one," Irina said. She drew a clean knife, its hilt carved with a crude mammoth head. Irina's thumb did something to the hilt. The shimmer of Y shield disappeared. "Pleasure or pain?" pain or pleasure, Landau chanted softly. Pleasure or pain. Irina smiled at each face in turn. Then she drew the knife across the soft, mud-smeared flesh of her upper arm. Blood spurted out. A woman winced. Landau bared his teeth. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Irina collapsed onto the mud, face down, writhing. Cassie grabbed her and pulled her to a sitting position. "Pleasure!" Landau crowed. Irina's face transformed. Her head tilted back, her back arched, her whole body shuddered. Then she collapsed against Cassie, trembling, her eyes closed. "A strong dose," Terry said. "Lucky Irina." Cassie laughed. Jackson couldn't watch her. He half turned away, standing ankle-deep in mud. It must be a selective nerve stimulator going right to the pleasure center. Addictive, degenerative, illegal. Blood still dripped from Irina's soft arm. The cell cleaner would take care of it, repair the cut faster than could the unaided body, destroy any infectious bacteria, consume the mud in the wound, no risk. He said, "What's on the pain knives?" Terry said, "Just that. The stimulator works directly on the brain." Landau said, "Very unpleasant, and it seems to last an eon." "You're all sick," Jackson said. "Every one of you." "Oh, dear," Landau said. "More morality." "Jackson, it's a party," Cassie said. "Don't be so grim." He gazed bleakly at her, smiling back at him, tenderly cradling Irina. These people were biologically under-aroused. Under-arousal produced thrill-seeking behavior. He could recite the neurochemistry, efficient levels of monoamine oxidase, serotonin, and cortisol, slow heart rate, low skin conductance, high threshold for nerve triggering, excess of dopamine, imbalance of norepinephrine, and allantolamase, plus, of course, whatever imbalances they were creating with the inhalers. Knowing the biochemistry didn't modify his disgust. "Come on, Cassie, we're leaving. You and me, now." She went on smiling at him, naked and covered with mud, the dreamily comatose Irina in her arms. She would refuse to go with him, of course. She had always refused anything he demanded. His mood shifted suddenly to a fearful elation. She would refuse. And then, after seeing her like this, with these under-aroused diseases, after this, he would be free of her. Finally, it would be over. He would be free. "All right, Jackson," Cassie said. "I'm coming." She laid Irina carefully on the mud and stood up, wiping a thick glob of mud off her wrist. "Hey, Cass, you can't go now," Terry said. "The party's just starting." "And I'm up next," a woman said. "Who wants to throw?" "Loser's prerogative," Landau said, "since Irina didn't choose me for the knife." "Cassie, don't go." "Good night," Cassie said. "Tell Irina I'll call her tomorrow." She took Jackson's hand. He dropped hers, bleakly, angrily, with trapped love. She followed him meekly to the elevator, down the hall. They met no one, it was 3 a.m., into the apartment, into the shower. Jackson saw that she'd left her inhaler behind. "I'm sorry, Jack," Cassie said when they were both clean. "I didn't think well. Of course you wouldn't like such a party. It's just that I missed you." He stared at her, trying to maintain his disgust, knowing he failed. "You didn't miss me, you just wanted more thrills. The only experiences you've ever thought worth having were intense thrills." "I know." "That's not normal, Cassie. Normal people don't need constant dangerous excitement to feel happy." "Then there are a hell of a lot of donkeys who aren't normal. Not anymore. Hold me, Jack." He stood stiffly, not moving. She put her arms around him and pressed against him. His naked cock rose into her belly. Her soft breasts breathed gently into his chest. Oh, Cassie. It was a groan, half desire and half defeat. No. I'll be sweet, she mumbled against his neck. You're so good to watch out for me. She did stay sweet, and tender and gentle, a vulnerable Cassie, holding back nothing, giving everything. Afterward, she fell asleep against his shoulder, curled into him like a child. The sheets were wet from the bodies they hadn't dried after their shower, from the sweet juices of lovemaking. Jackson lay awake in the dark, holding her, wishing that she hadn't come with him from the party, wishing that she would never leave his bedroom, wishing that he were a different kind of person from what he was, more resolute, more able to sustain anger, more able to write her off. There were neuropharms that would do that, modify his neurochemistry, rebalance transmitters and hormones and enzymes. Less CRF, more testosterone, less serotonin, fewer dopamine reuptake inhibitors, more ADL. Like the people at the party, Terry and Irina and Landau. No. He couldn't sleep. After thrashing and turning for half an hour, he eased himself out of bed. He kissed Cassie's cheek, put on a robe, and padded to the library. Carolyn, messages, please. Yes, Jackson, said his personal system in the slightly formal voice he preferred. You have 4 messages. Shall I list them in the order received? Why not? He poured himself a whiskey from the sideboard. Message from Kenneth Bishop from Wichita. Subject, Willoughby plant. The Ten-Tech chief engineer. He had finally checked on the deranged factory. A week late. Maybe Ten-Tech needed another chief. Christ, Jackson hated dealing with this shit. Message from Tamara Gould from Manhattan. Subject, party. The last thing Jackson wanted tonight was another party. Would Cassie want to go? If he took her, would Cassie stay with him a little longer? Message from Brandon Heilecker from Yale. Subject, class reunion. Oh, God. Had it been 10 years since his BA? A reunion. And what do you do, Jackson? A doctor? Isn't that a little superfluous? Message from Lizzie Francie. Subject, baby project. Baby project? What did that mean? Had something happened to the baby Jackson had delivered last week? Why call it a project? But then what did Jackson really know about what livers called anything? Carolyn, give me that message, please. Lizzie's face formed on the small screen. Unlike the last time he had seen them, Lizzie's expression was alert and her hair neatly combed. Her black eyes sparkled. Her speech, he noted, sounded donkey, not liver. Victoria Turner's doing? This is Lizzie Francie for Dr. Jackson Aronow. Dr. Aronow, I'm calling because I need your help. It's a project connected to the baby's health, not just my baby that you delivered, but all babies in the tribe. And maybe other tribes. She hesitated, and her voice changed. Please call back. It's really, really important. Another hesitation, then a curiously stiff little bow of the head. Thank you. End of message, Carolyn said. Do you wish to reply? No. Yes. If the baby had had some kind of accident. Project? Record message. Recording. Dr. Jackson Aronow for Lizzie Francie. Please give me more details about your problem. Is the baby in need of medical attention? If so, then... To his surprise, Lizzie's face in real time interrupted his recording. It was 4:30 in the morning. What was she doing, overriding his personal system? And how was she doing it? Dr. Aronow, thank you for calling back. We desperately need your help. Could you... Is the baby all right? The baby's fine. See? She enlarged the screen scope. He saw that she was nursing her infant son. Then why did you say this project was for the baby's health? It is, but long term. I didn't know who else to ask. It's a really important project. Jackson had the feeling he should hang up. Livers. It was always a mistake to get involved with them. Provide the basic necessities out of human charity, yes. Donkeys had tried to do that. It wasn't the donkeys' fault if Livers had rejected the social contract, goods for votes, that had provided for their needs. Beyond that, Livers were difficult. Uneducated, demanding, ungrateful, dangerous, and the sight of Lizzie's full breast in her child's mouth made him oddly uncomfortable. He thought of Cassie asleep in his bed. Lizzie said, "Did you ever hear of a woman named Ellie Sandra Lester?" Jackson drew in a breath. "Yes," he said. "Go on." Interlude. Transmission date, November 28, 2120. To Selene Base, Moon. Via Boston Ground Station, GEO Satellite 1453-L, U.S., Luna City Ground Station. Message type, encrypted. Message class, Class B, private paid transmission. Originating group, Gene Modern, Inc., Boston, Massachusetts. Message. Ms. Sharifi, as we said in our previous two transmissions, Gene Modern is interested in pursuing a commercial partnership with Selene Base in developing viable extensions of your patented product, the Cell Cleaner trademark. We believe that our research facilities, among the best in the world, have succeeded in duplicating some of the non-patented aspects of your groundbreaking work in cellular biology. See attached documents. The rest remains not only proprietary, but, let us be frank, beyond our current capabilities. What we can bring to a partnership with Selene is unparalleled manufacturing abilities, superb international distribution, and high-quality investment interest. The former two attributes may be more necessary to you than formerly, since your relocation at Selene. The latter would relieve you of the financial exposure your first venture must have entailed. In addition, our data security system, designed by Kevin Baker, ranks among the most excellent anywhere. See attached documents. We believe that the ROI opportunities in a Gene Modern Selene partnership are without precedent. Therefore, Gene Modern invites your earliest reply. Yours very truly, Gordon Keller Brown, CEO, Gene Modern, Inc. Acknowledgement? None received.